A woman thrown to the floor, a diner full of witnesses who looked away, three wealthy boys who had never once been told no, and a former Navy SEAL who couldn't walk past it. Nobody in that diner knew his name. Nobody knew what he'd survived overseas or what it had cost him to come home. They just saw a quiet man with a dog stand up when nobody else would. That single choice, lasting maybe 30 seconds, was about to destroy his career, his reputation, and everything he'd spent years rebuilding. Like this video and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The dog smelled the trouble before Logan did. Rex was 12 years old and mostly retired from everything except sleeping in sunbeams and stealing food off Logan's daughter's plate when she wasn't looking. He had a bad hip, a gray muzzle, and a disposition that had softened considerably since his working days in Kandahar and Mosul. But he still had the instincts, and when Logan pulled the truck off Route 9 into the gravel lot of Patty's roadside diner, Rex lifted his head from the back seat, sniffed once, and made a low sound in his throat that wasn't quite a growl. It was more of a warning. Logan glanced at him in the rear-view mirror. "I know," he said. "I'm hungry too." He cracked the rear windows, grabbed his jacket off the passenger seat, and climbed out. The afternoon was dry and cool. That particular quality of October air in rural Virginia that smelled like wood smoke and dying leaves. The parking lot was full, a cluster of motorcycles near the entrance, two pickup trucks with out-of-state plates, a row of ordinary sedans belonging to the lunch crowd. Nothing that should have triggered Rex's instincts. Logan pushed through the glass door. The noise hit him first. Not the normal diner noise. The clink of silverware, the low murmur of conversation, the hiss of something on the griddle. This was different. Louder in one particular corner and conspicuously quiet everywhere else. He stood just inside the door and took it in. The diner was long and narrow, the kind of place that hadn't changed its decor since the early 90s. Laminate tabletops, vinyl booths, a long counter with round stools. Patty's had been there since before Logan was born, which meant it had survived 3 recessions, a fire in the kitchen in 2009, and the construction of a Cracker Barrel 6 miles down the road that everyone said would kill it. It was still standing. The booths were full. 40 people, maybe more. Every single one of them had their eyes on the same corner of the room. 3 young men stood near a table by the window, late teens, early 20s at the oldest. Expensive clothes worn with the casual insolence of people who'd never had to think about what anything cost. One of them was very tall and wore a lacrosse jersey from Whitmore Prep, a private school 40 minutes east. Another one was thick through the shoulders, the kind of heaviness that came from being large since childhood rather than from any particular effort. The third one, the one doing most of the talking, was slender, dark-haired, and had the kind of face that photographed well and meant absolutely nothing. On the floor in front of them was a young woman. She had dark hair pulled back in a bun that had come partially loose. She was wearing a diner uniform, the pale blue one with the white trim that all the waitstaff at Patty's wore. And she was on her hands and knees on the linoleum, and there was a broken coffee mug in pieces around her and a dark stain spreading across the floor. She wasn't crying. That was the first thing Logan noticed. Her jaw was set hard, and she was pushing herself up with one hand, and her wrist was shaking slightly with the effort, and she was not going to cry in front of these people. "Don't get up too fast, sweetheart," the dark-haired one said. He was smiling. It was the worst kind of smile, the kind that understood it had an audience. "You might spill something else." His friends laughed. One of them had a phone out, pointed at her. She made it to one knee. Her knees were on the wet floor and the broken ceramic, and Logan could see from across the diner that one of her palms was bleeding. She didn't look at them. She was looking at the middle distance, the way people do when they're somewhere else in their head, when the only way through a moment is to pretend their body is elsewhere. Logan stood there for 3 seconds. He counted them, later. 3 seconds was how long it took him to read the room. The 40 people sitting in their booths not making eye contact with each other. The waitress behind the counter who had her hand pressed flat against her collarbone and was watching with the frozen expression of someone who desperately wanted the situation to resolve itself without her having to do anything about it. The manager's office door that was closed. The kid with the phone still recording. 3 seconds was also how long it took for him to understand that nobody else was going to move. He walked over. He didn't walk fast. He didn't walk with any particular purpose that would have telegraphed what he was doing to the 3 boys. He just walked toward the window table the way a man walks toward an empty seat, unhurried, neither avoiding eye contact nor seeking it, and he crouched down next to the woman on the floor and said quietly, "Let me help you up." She looked at him. Up close, she was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe 28, 29. There was a bruise forming along her cheekbone, and the cut on her palm was from the ceramic, and her eyes were dark brown and exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with today. "I'm fine," she said. The automatic response of someone who'd said it too many times for it to mean anything. "You're cut," Logan said. He offered his hand. She looked at it for a moment, and then she took it, and he helped her stand. "Who the hell are you?" the dark-haired one said. Logan straightened up and turned to look at him. He was about 6 feet from the boy. The boy was maybe 20 years old, well-fed, and had the posture of someone who'd been the most dangerous person in every room he'd ever entered. He had a lacrosse bag at his feet and a class ring on his right hand, and he was looking at Logan the way territorial dogs look at each other. Measuring, deciding. "I'm nobody," Logan said. "Apologize to her." The boy blinked. Whatever he'd expected the man in the worn jacket to say, it wasn't that. He laughed once, a short surprise sound, and looked at his friends. "Did you hear this guy?" "Apologize," Logan said again. Same tone. Not louder. Not softer. "Listen, buddy." The boy stepped forward. He had 3 inches on Logan and was using them the way tall young men who've never been in a real fight do. "You don't know who you're talking to." "I know exactly what I'm looking at," Logan said. "I've seen it on 3 continents. Apologize to the woman." The temperature in the diner changed. The boy's 2 friends had shifted positions slightly, unconsciously, Logan thought, because they weren't tactical thinkers, but they'd spread out the way people do when they're preparing for something physical. The one with the phone had stopped recording and put it in his pocket, which was interesting. The dark-haired boy looked at Logan for a long moment, then his expression closed like a door and he swung. It was a wild hook, thrown from the shoulder with the confidence of someone who'd never missed. Logan had been watching his weight distribution for the past 30 seconds, which meant he already knew which way it was coming. He turned his body slightly, let the punch sail past his ear, trapped the boy's arm with both hands in one clean movement, and had him on the floor in under 2 seconds. It wasn't violent. That was the thing Logan would think about later, and that the surveillance footage would eventually confirm to a jury. There was no impact, no strike. He simply redirected the boy's own momentum, controlled the arm, and placed him on the linoleum with firm, precise, practiced economy. The boy was face down on the diner floor, Logan's knee on the back of his thigh, his right arm held at an angle that was uncomfortable but not damaging. "Stay still," Logan said quietly. "You're not hurt." "Get him off me," the boy snarled. "Tyler." The large one took a step forward. "Don't," Logan said, looking up at him. There was something in his voice that stopped the boy mid-stride. Not a threat exactly, just a very clear statement of fact about how the next few seconds would proceed if the large one took another step. The large one stopped. The diner was absolutely silent. 40 people. Not a fork scraped a plate. Not a coffee cup was set down. Logan looked at the dark-haired boy on the floor. Tyler, apparently. "When you stand up," Logan said, "you're going to apologize to her, and then you're going to sit down and wait for whoever owns that car out front to come in and pay for the mug you knocked out of her hand. Do you understand?" "You are so done," Tyler said through his teeth. "Do you have any idea, yes or no?" A pause, long enough to be humiliating. "Yes," Tyler said. Logan let go of his arm, stood up, and stepped back. Tyler got up off the floor. His face was a particular shade of crimson that had nothing to do with physical exertion and everything to do with the fact that 40 people had watched him go down, and the woman he'd knocked to the floor was still standing there watching him, and the man who'd put him there hadn't even raised his voice. He looked at the woman. His jaw worked. "Sorry," he said. It was barely a word. It was the absolute minimum expenditure of syllables that the situation required. The woman, her name tag said Hannah, looked at him for a moment. She didn't say anything. She bent down and started picking up the broken pieces of the mug. Logan crouched and helped her. Her name was Hannah Pierce. He found that out 15 minutes later, when the manager finally emerged from his office and the diner slowly returned to something like normal, and Logan was sitting at the counter drinking bad coffee, and Hannah came to refill it with her bandaged hand wrapped in a paper towel and a piece of medical tape from the first aid kit under the counter. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. It's going to be worse now." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, the way you'd tell someone the weather forecast. "Those aren't kids whose parents let things go. Who are they?" She glanced toward the corner. Tyler and his friends were gone. They'd left after the apology, Tyler's face still holding that particular hot fury of someone building a story in their head that made them the protagonist. "Tyler Ashford," she said. "His father is Douglas Ashford." Logan didn't recognize the name. He'd been away too long, was too new to this corner of Virginia. He shook his head slightly. "He owns half the commercial real estate in the county," Hannah said. "Sits on the school board. His wife is on the county council." She wiped down the counter in a practiced sweep. "They sued the last restaurant that asked Tyler to leave. Won." "Did Tyler actually push you?" She was quiet for a moment. "He knocked the coffee out of my hand on purpose. I slipped on it. He thought that was funnier than just pushing me, I think." "Did anyone else see it?" "Everyone saw it," she said. The bitterness in her voice was so old it had become something else, something tired and flat and resigned. "That's different from anyone saying they saw it." Logan looked around the diner. A few people glanced away when his eyes landed on them. Most didn't. Most had that expression he recognized from places he'd rather not think about. The particular look of people who had decided that what they'd witnessed had nothing to do with them and were now engaged in the active work of believing it. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. Hannah refilled his cup without being asked. "Tyler and his friends come in every few weeks. They harass the staff. They've gotten physical twice before. Nothing that ever got reported officially. The owner doesn't want the trouble. Why do you stay?" She looked at him. It wasn't a rude question, but it was a personal one, and he was a stranger, and he watched her decide whether to answer it. "I need the money," she said. Simple as that. "I take care of my sister. She has MS. The good shifts here pay better than most places in this county, and the manager lets me swap when she has bad weeks." Logan nodded. "You should be careful going home tonight," she said. She wasn't looking at him, wiping down the counter again, her voice neutral. "Tyler's going to call his father. His father has a lawyer on retainer. This kind of thing, She stopped. "They've done it before. Someone stands up to him, and the next thing you know, there are witnesses who remember it differently." Logan considered that. He turned the coffee cup in his hands. It was a diner mug, heavy ceramic, the kind that had been through 1,000 wash cycles and would survive 1,000 more. "What's your last name?" he asked. "Pierce. Why?" "Because when this comes back around," Logan said, "and you're right that it will, you should know there's at least one person who isn't going to remember it differently." She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression shifted. Not hope exactly, because hope was something Hannah Pierce had learned to keep on a short leash, but something adjacent to it. Something careful and waiting. "Hannah Pierce," she said. "And you're?" "Logan Hayes." He hadn't planned to stay in Cedar Fork. That was the honest truth, the kind he only admitted to himself in the early mornings when his daughter was still asleep and the house was quiet and there was nothing between him and his own thoughts. He'd come to Virginia because his sister lived here, and she'd offered him a place to land after the discharge. And Cedar Fork was an hour away from her in a county where property taxes were low, and people mostly left you alone. He'd rented a farmhouse on 6 acres because his daughter, Maisie, needed space and quiet after the 2 years they'd spent in a 2-bedroom apartment in San Diego, while Logan tried to figure out what came after. After was a complicated concept. After meant the end of 16 years of service, which he'd spent in a career that had taken him to places the military briefings described with coordinates instead of names, because names implied they existed. After meant 2 surgeries on his shoulder, a hearing loss in his left ear that a specialist described as moderate but manageable, and a recurring pattern in his sleep that wasn't exactly nightmares but wasn't exactly restful either. After meant explaining to his 7-year-old daughter why they were moving again and watching her process that with a child's particular brand of pragmatism, she'd named every room in the new house before they were done unpacking. After also meant that Logan had been single for 6 years, had primary custody of Maisie since she was 18 months old, and had developed what his sister generously described as an inability to disengage from other people's problems. His sister had used that phrase the previous Christmas, gently, over a glass of wine. She wasn't wrong. He'd known it about himself for a long time. It was the thing that had made him good at his job and difficult to live with simultaneously. He thought about that while he drove home from Patty's, Rex's head hanging out the rear window in the October wind, Maisie's school bag on the passenger seat, waiting for pickup in 2 hours. By the time he reached the farmhouse, he had a missed call. The number wasn't one he recognized. He called back from the porch while Rex wandered into the yard. "Mr. Hayes." The voice was smooth, mid-register, the kind of voice that spent a lot of time in conference rooms. "My name is Richard Holt. I'm calling on behalf of Douglas Ashford." Logan leaned against the porch railing. Below him, Rex was investigating something in the long grass along the fence line. "That was fast," Logan said. "Mr. Ashford is understandably concerned about what occurred at the diner this afternoon. His son threw a punch at me," Logan said. "I think the facts of this situation are a little more complex than, he threw a punch. I put him on the floor. No one got hurt." His son apologized. If Mr. Ashford is concerned about anything, maybe he should start with why his son is spending his afternoons harassing restaurant staff. A pause. "Mr. Hayes, I'd strongly encourage you to think carefully about the position you're putting yourself in. Assault charges are you recording this call?" Another pause. Shorter. "I'm going to want the name of your firm," Logan said, "and I'm going to want it spelled correctly." The line went dead. Logan stood on the porch for a while after that, looking out at the field. The afternoon light was going gold and long, the way it does in October when the sun drops early. Rex had found whatever he was looking for in the grass, a field mouse probably, and was sitting in the yard with the satisfied expression of a retired soldier who'd accomplished something meaningful with his afternoon. Logan took out his phone and did something he hadn't planned to do. He looked up Hannah Pierce. She wasn't hard to find. Small county, limited digital footprint. He found a Facebook profile that was mostly inactive, a few posts from 2 years back about a fundraiser for MS research, a GoFundMe campaign that had raised $1,100 of a $12,000 goal. In the profile picture, Hannah was standing outside a small house with a young woman in a wheelchair, both of them squinting into the sun. The young woman had Hannah's eyes and was holding a paper cup of something cold, and they were both not quite smiling the way people do when they're genuinely happy but self-conscious about photographs. The caption read, "My person, my whole reason." Logan put his phone in his pocket and stood there for a while longer. He picked Maisie up at 3:45. She was 7 and opinionated and had her mother's coloring, dark eyes, brown hair that went copper in the summer, and Logan's stubbornness, which his ex-wife Angela had pointed out exactly once before she'd left for Portland, and a life that made more sense to her than the one they'd been trying to build. It wasn't a bitter thing, their ending. It was just a quiet acknowledgement that they'd both been trying very hard for a long time to be people they weren't. Logan had been trying to be the kind of man who came home and left the work at the office. Angela had been trying to be the kind of woman who could live with a man who couldn't. Maisie didn't talk about her mother often. When she did, it was with a 7-year-old's pragmatism. "Mom lives far away, but she calls on Sundays, and she sent me the purple jacket that I like." She had framed it in her head as a situation that simply existed, and Logan had been careful not to color it otherwise. "Dad," she said, climbing into the truck. "Zoe said that German Shepherds are not good family dogs, but Rex sleeps in my room, and that doesn't count as dangerous." "Zoe's wrong," Logan said. "That's what I told her." Rex, from the back seat, licked the side of Maisie's face in a way that settled the matter. They stopped for groceries. Maisie wanted to get pasta and a specific kind of tomato sauce that came in a jar with a green lid, and which she had decided was the only acceptable variety, and Logan let her push the cart because it gave her something to do while he thought about the phone call he'd gotten and what exactly the Ashford family's lawyer thought was going to happen next. He was in the pasta aisle when his phone rang again, different number. "Logan Hayes?" A woman's voice, direct, no preamble. "Who's asking?" "My name is Detective Karen Mull. I'm with the Cedar Fork Sheriff's Department. You were involved in an incident at Patty's diner this afternoon. He watched Maisie deliberate between two identical-looking boxes of rigatoni with the focused energy of someone making a consequential decision. I was. I'd like to come by tomorrow and take a statement if you're willing, just informal at this point. What does at this point mean? A short pause. It means the Ashford family's attorney filed a complaint with the department this evening. It means I'd like to hear your version before this becomes something more complicated than it needs to be. Logan put a jar of pasta sauce in the cart, green lid. Has anyone taken a statement from Hannah Pierce yet? We reached out. She hasn't called back. She won't, Logan said. Not meanly, as fact. Not until she knows whether it's safe to. Another pause, longer. You sound like someone who knows how these things work. I've seen people with lawyers tell stories before, Logan said. Yeah. Can I come by at 9? Sure, he said. Bring coffee. I'll save you the trouble of mine. He made Maisie pasta for dinner, the sauce with the green lid, and she sat across from him at the kitchen table doing homework with one foot tucked under her and Rex under the table with his chin on her foot. The kitchen smelled like garlic and olive oil, and the wood smoke from the outdoor fire pit Logan had been meaning to clean out for 3 weeks. Dad? Maisie said, not looking up from her worksheet. Yeah. Did something happen today? He looked at her. She was still looking at her paper, pencil moving. She had that quality sometimes, his daughter, a kind of peripheral awareness, a sensitivity to atmospherics. She'd gotten it from spending too much of her early life reading moods in rooms. Why do you ask? You're doing the thing, she said, where you eat, but you're not really eating. He looked down at his plate. She wasn't wrong. Something happened, he said. I helped somebody. It might make things a little complicated for a while. She looked up then. Her eyes were serious. Are you in trouble? No, he said. Not in any way that matters. She looked at him for a moment, deciding whether that was enough. Okay, she said, and went back to her worksheet. After dinner, when Maisie was in bed and Rex was on the rug at the foot of her bedroom door, Logan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and did what he should have done that afternoon. He looked up Douglas Ashford. The picture that emerged was specific and unpleasant. Douglas Ashford, 61, had made his money in commercial real estate in the late 90s, during a period when Cedar Fork County had been expanding rapidly. He sat on the boards of 4 local institutions, including Cedar Fork National Bank, which held the mortgages on a significant portion of the businesses in town. His wife, Caroline, was a county council member. He had 2 children, Tyler, 19, a sophomore at Whitmore Prep, and a daughter in middle school. He was a regular donor to the county sheriff's office's annual fundraiser. He had also, in the past 7 years, been named in 3 civil suits related to business practices, all of which had been settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. Logan found that not in any news article, but in a public court filing database, which required some patience to navigate, and which he suspected most people in Cedar Fork had never thought to check. He closed the laptop at 11 and went to bed. He didn't sleep particularly well, which wasn't unusual, but he also didn't not sleep the way he had in the years right after he'd come home, when being awake and being asleep had blurred together in ways that made it difficult to know which one was worse. This was just ordinary wakefulness, the low, persistent alertness of a man who had been handed a problem he hadn't looked for and was now turning it over in his hands. He'd known it would come back around. Hannah had known too. The question was what shape it would take. Detective Karen Mull arrived at 8:50 with 2 cups of coffee from the Shell station 6 miles down the road and an expression that told him she'd had a phone call or 2 that morning that she hadn't enjoyed. She was 40-something, compact, with dark hair starting to go gray at the temples. She had the economical movements of someone who'd been doing this work long enough that nothing about it surprised her anymore, which Logan recognized because he'd cultivated the same quality in himself for entirely different reasons. She sat across from him at the kitchen table, accepted the coffee he'd made anyway, and set her recorder on the table between them. Mind if I record this? Go ahead. Tell me what happened. He told her. Start to finish, nothing embellished, nothing omitted. The drive-in, Rex's reaction, the diner, Hannah on the floor, the 3 boys, Tyler's swing, the restraint, the apology. Mull listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Tyler Ashford says you attacked him, she said, unprovoked. Okay. His two friends corroborate the story. Okay. She looked at him. You don't seem particularly worried about that. There's a surveillance camera above the counter at Patty's, Logan said. It was pointing at that corner of the diner. If the owner hasn't erased or handed over the footage already, it shows exactly what I told you. Mull set down her coffee. Something behind her eyes sharpened. You noticed the camera. Old habit. When did you serve? 16 years. Mostly overseas. Mostly the kind of work that doesn't get its own press release. She nodded slowly. The footage is something we're working on obtaining. Working on, Logan said. The owner received a call from an attorney last night suggesting the footage might be subject to a preservation order from a civil proceeding, Logan finished. Yeah, that's one play. Mull looked at him. You've seen this before. Different theater, same script, he said. Somebody with resources and lawyers manufactures a version of events that has enough legal weight to make the real version expensive to maintain. Most people can't afford the cost of telling the truth. Can you? He looked out the window at the yard. The morning was cold and gray, the field going silver with frost. I guess we're going to find out, he said. After she left, Logan sat with his second cup of coffee and thought about Hannah Pierce and the GoFundMe campaign that had raised $1,100 and the sister with the MS and the job at Patty's and the fact that she hadn't called the detective back. He thought about that for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. Hannah. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd had the phone in her hand. This is Logan Hayes from the diner yesterday. A short silence. I know who you are, she said. I've been expecting you to call. There's a detective named Mull who wants to take your statement. She came to see me this morning. I know. Her voice was carefully neutral. She's not working for Ashford, Logan said. I don't think. You don't think. I read her right, he said. I've been wrong before, but not often. Another silence. Outside, a crow landed on the fence post near the barn and sat there looking at nothing in particular. They called my manager last night, Hannah said. The Ashfords. His attorney called. My manager is telling me to think carefully about making things difficult. She said it with the quotation marks audible in her voice. Are you thinking carefully? I think carefully about everything, she said. I don't have the luxury of not. I know. You don't know, she said, and there was a flicker of something real in it. Not anger exactly, but a kind of exhausted precision. You're a man who helped someone out once in a diner, and now you're treating it like a mission. I live in this county. I work in this county. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is Douglas Ashford. And when this is over, I still have to fill the same prescriptions and pay the same bills and show up to the same job. Logan didn't say anything for a moment. You're right, he said finally. I don't know. I know what I saw yesterday, and I know what I told the detective, and I know I'm going to keep telling the same story because it happens to be the true one. What you do is yours to decide. A long silence. The crow on the fence post ruffled its feathers. Why? She said. Why do you even care? You don't know me. No, Logan said, but I know what I watched 40 people decide not to do, and I've been in rooms where people didn't act when they should have, and I've lived with what that looks like afterward. I don't want to be in that room again. The silence this time was different, longer and quieter, like the pause after a statement that's arrived somewhere true. What do you think happens next? She said. I think they try to make it expensive, Logan said. Legally, reputationally. I think some of those witnesses change their stories. I think your manager gets more phone calls. I think it gets uncomfortable before it gets better. And you're still in? He looked out at the frost-gray field, his daughter's bike leaning against the side of the barn, Rex moving slow and stiff through the grass in the morning cold, nose down, following something only he could smell. Yeah, he said. I'm still in. He heard her breathe. Then, okay, she said. I'll call the detective. It wasn't a dramatic moment. She didn't sound grateful, exactly, or reassured. She sounded like a person who had made a careful calculation about risk and decided, against everything she'd learned to expect from the world, to move forward anyway. Logan thought, looking at that field in the cold October morning, that it was the bravest thing he'd heard in a long time. And somewhere across town, in a house with a gate and a circular driveway and a lawyer's number at the top of a recent call list, Tyler Ashford was telling his father a story. And his father was listening. And something was already in motion that neither Logan nor Hannah could see the full shape of yet, something that had been building for years probably, in the gaps between the complaints that never got filed and the footage that nearly disappeared, and the witnesses who learned to look away. Something that was going to take everything they had. Logan finished his coffee. Then he went inside to make his daughter breakfast. The article went up on a Wednesday. Logan found it the way most people found bad news about themselves, through someone else. His sister, Dana, called him at 7 in the morning before he'd had his second cup of coffee, and her voice had that particular quality it got when she was trying to be calm about something that was not calm. "There's a piece on the Cedar Fork Courier website," she said. "You should read it." He read it standing at the kitchen counter while Maisie ate cereal at the table behind him, and Rex moved between them doing his morning circuit. The headline was, "Local Family Files Complaint After Alleged Assault at Area Diner." The byline belonged to a reporter named Greg Ferris, and the piece was 460 words long, and every single one of those words had been arranged with surgical precision to accomplish a specific thing. It described Tyler Ashford as a student athlete with a clean record. It described Logan as a former military contractor, not Navy SEAL, not security consultant, but contractor, with all the ambiguity that word carried. It described the incident as a physical altercation that witnesses reported had been initiated by the unnamed individual. It quoted Douglas Ashford directly. "My son did nothing wrong. This was an unprovoked attack by a man with a history of violence, and we intend to pursue every legal avenue available." It mentioned in the second-to-last paragraph that a waitress had been involved in an earlier dispute without naming her, without describing what had actually happened to her, and without quoting anyone who'd been on her side of it. Logan set the phone down. "Dad?" Maisie was watching him from the table, spoon partway to her mouth. "Eat your breakfast," he said. His voice came out even, which he was grateful for. He drove Maisie to school, came home, and called Hannah. "I saw it," she said. She'd clearly been awake for a while. Her voice had the flat quality of someone who'd moved through the initial reaction and come out on the other side into something grimmer and more practical. "They didn't use my name because they're saving that. When they do use it, it'll be with everything attached. My sister's medical bills, the GoFundMe. They'll make me look desperate." "Are you talking to Detective Mull?" "I called her yesterday. She took my statement." A short pause. "She was fine. I mean that. She was actually fine. She asked the right questions, and she didn't make me feel like I was the one in trouble." Another pause. "It's a weird feeling. Being believed? Being treated like my version might matter." Logan had been leaning against the kitchen counter, and he straightened up and went to the window. The morning was pale and cold, a thin layer of clouds making the light flat and gray. In the yard, Rex had found his spot in the dead grass near the fence and was lying with his nose on his paws, watching nothing. "Mull told me something when she left yesterday," Logan said. "She said there have been prior complaints about Tyler Ashford and his friends. At least 4 in the past 2 years. None of them went anywhere." "I know about 2 of them," Hannah said. "One was a girl from the community college. Tyler and some other boys followed her in a parking lot. She filed a report and then withdrew it 3 weeks later. The other one was a man who worked at the gas station on Route 9. They came in and made a scene, broke something, he called the police. It got written up as a misunderstanding." "Written up by who?" She was quiet for a moment. "Deputy whose name I don't know. But there's a deputy named Carver who shows up whenever anything involving the Ashfords comes up. He's been on the department about 15 years. He coached youth lacrosse for a while. Tyler played lacrosse." Logan was quiet. "You're putting it together," Hannah said. It wasn't a question. "Someone's been running interference," he said. "Not doing anything dramatic enough to leave a clear trail. Just making things go away before they become real." "That's how it works here," Hannah said. And there was no particular anger in it, just the exhausted familiarity of someone who'd understood this for a long time without being able to prove it. "It's not a conspiracy. It's just how people protect each other when they have more to lose than you do." "Yeah." The attorney's name was Patricia Renner, and she drove 2 hours from Richmond because Mull had called her. And Mull had called her because Karen Mull had been doing this job for 19 years and knew that when an Ashford family lawyer started making calls at 7 in the evening, whatever was coming was going to require more than a county detective and a statement on file. Renner was 53, tall, and wore her gray hair in a shortcut that she didn't appear to think about at all. She met Logan at a coffee shop in the next town over, 20 miles from Cedar Fork, enough distance that it didn't feel like a performance. She was already there when he arrived, reading something on her phone, and she looked up and assessed him in about 3 seconds in a way that felt familiar because he'd done it to enough people himself. "Detective Mull says you're not an idiot," she said by way of greeting. "High praise," Logan said, sitting down. "From Karen, it is." She put the phone down. "Tell me what you saw." He told her. The same version he'd told Mull, the same version he'd told Dana, the same version he would keep telling because it was what had happened. Renner listened with her elbows on the table and her fingers loosely folded, and she didn't write anything down, which told Logan she was one of those people who processed by listening first. When he finished, she said, "The footage. Still at Patty's, as far as I know. The owner is caught between Ashford's attorney and Mull's preservation request. Mull filed one yesterday afternoon," Renner said. The Ashford attorney tried to argue it was subject to civil discovery hold. Judge Brennan disagreed." She paused. "Brennan is one of 2 judges in this county who Ashford doesn't have a relationship with. Lucky." "Is it luck?" Renner looked at him. "No," she said. "It's Mull knowing which judge to call." "She's been building toward something," Logan said. This isn't the first time she's had the Ashfords in her peripheral vision. Karen's been in that department 19 years, and for the last 4 of them, every complaint that touches the Ashford family has landed on someone else's desk. She's been watching the pattern. Renner picked up her coffee. "What you did at that diner, it wasn't just an incident. It was the first one where there was a witness who wasn't going to move. I'm not trying to be anyone's evidence." "I know," Renner said, "but that's what you are, whether you want it or not. You and the footage." She set down the cup. "I want to represent Hannah Pierce. I've done pro bono civil rights work before. The question is whether she'll let me." "She's careful," Logan said. "She should be. She has more to lose than you do." Renner looked at him steadily. "You were in the military. You've got some kind of security consulting income. Your daughter has a father who's present. If this gets ugly, and it will get ugly, you'll bruise, but you'll survive. Hannah Pierce is 1 bad month away from losing the job that keeps her sister in care. She knows that." Logan was quiet for a moment. Outside the coffee shop window, the main street of Dunmore, Virginia moved in its slow, midweek way. 2 people walking a dog. A pickup at the light. Ordinary life at ordinary speed. "She called Mull on her own," he said. "I suggested it, but she made the call." "That matters," Renner said. "Yeah, it does." Renner picked up her phone. "I'm going to call her this afternoon. If she says yes, we move quickly, because the Ashfords' next step is going to be a civil suit naming you, and once that's filed, it reshapes the narrative." She paused. "They're going to paint you as unstable. Military background, history of physical confrontation, anger issues. It's a predictable playbook." "I know the playbook." "Do you have anything they can use?" Logan thought about it honestly. "I've got a record that's entirely classified, which means they can say whatever they want about what's in it, and I can't contradict it publicly. I've got a shoulder that required 2 surgeries. I've got a divorce. Custody arrangement. Clean. Angela and I worked it out without attorneys, no disputes. Any incidents? Anything that got written up anywhere?" "No." He paused. "I've never hurt anyone who wasn't trying to hurt someone else." Renner looked at him for a long moment. "I believe you," she said. "The camera's going to back that up. But between now and when this gets in front of anyone who matters, you're going to have to watch people say things about you that you know aren't true, and you're going to have to sit on it. I've done that before." "Not like this," she said, not unkindly. "Not when it's in your hometown, with your daughter watching, and a woman who trusted you on the line." Logan looked at his coffee. It had gone lukewarm, the way diner coffee does faster than it should. He hadn't touched it since she'd started talking. "Okay," he said. "Ma'am." The civil suit was filed 11 days later. Ashford versus Hayes appeared in the county court records on a Thursday, and by Friday morning it had been picked up by 3 local news outlets and 1 regional one. Logan's name was now attached to a documented legal filing, which meant it was searchable, which meant that when parents at Maisie's school Googled him, they found it. He found out about the parents because of a phone call from Maisie's teacher. Mr. Hayes, I just want you to know that we've had a couple of calls, parents asking about the news coverage. And I want you to know that our position at the school is that everyone is entitled to due process. And Maisie is absolutely— What kind of calls? He asked. A short pause. Concerns about having a child in the class whose parent where there's been an allegation. He stood in the kitchen doorway. Maisie was in the living room with Rex watching something on television, her feet tucked under her on the couch, the dog's head on her lap. He watched her laugh at something on the screen. Has Maisie had any trouble? He asked. His voice was steady. No, nothing like that. She seems fine. I just thought you should know. Thank you, he said. I appreciate you calling. He hung up. He stood in the doorway for a while. Then he went and sat on the couch next to his daughter, and Rex redistributed himself with the mild indignation of a dog whose arrangement has been disrupted, and Maisie leaned into Logan's arm the way she did without thinking about it, automatically, the way you lean into something solid. This is the part where the duck figures out the farmer's been lying, she explained, gesturing at the screen. Sounds familiar, Logan said. What? Hannah met Patricia Renner in person on a Tuesday at the library in Dunmore, which was neutral ground. Logan didn't go. It was deliberate. He'd suggested Renner, he'd vouched for her, and then he'd stepped back because the decision needed to be Hannah's in the fullest sense of the word, without him in the room making it complicated. Hannah called him afterward from her car. She's good, Hannah said. Yeah. She told me things I didn't know, about how civil harassment cases work, about what they can and can't use. A pause. She told me they've been contacting former coworkers of mine, trying to build a picture. Former coworkers from where? A restaurant I worked at 4 years ago, before Patty's. Her voice was careful. I had a conflict with the manager there. I asked HR to look into it and nothing happened and I quit. They're going to use that. Paint me as someone who makes false complaints. Did you make a false complaint? No. Then it's a prior attempt to address legitimate harassment that went nowhere, which actually supports what happened at Patty's. He paused. Renner see it that way? She said almost exactly that. A short sound that might have been a laugh, small and reluctant. She also said they're going to go after my finances, the medical bills for my sister, the GoFundMe. They want to make you look desperate enough to lie for money. My sister needs a new wheelchair, Hannah said, and her voice shifted in a way that was very controlled and very tired. The chair she has is 4 years old and the motor's going. The one that fits her properly costs $6,000. I've been putting aside $40 a week for 8 months. She stopped. $40 a week is a lot some weeks. Logan didn't say anything for a moment. I'm telling you because Renner says they'll find out and use it, and I'd rather you know it from me, Hannah said. I don't want you standing up for someone and not knowing who that person actually is, that the wheelchair exists, that the money is a problem, that I'm not— She stopped again. Not what? Not the uncomplicated victim, she said. I'm not a symbol. I'm a person who works doubles and orders generic everything and still falls short most months. And if you're in this, you're in it with that. I know, Logan said. You keep saying that. Because I mean it differently than you think I do, he said. When I say I know, I'm not saying I understand what your life is like. I'm saying I know that the complicated version of a person is the real one, and the real one is what I'm standing next to, not the clean version. A long silence. The kind that has weight. Okay, she said. It was the same word she'd used before, that same careful, considered okay. Not relief, not warmth, just, I've weighed this, and I'm choosing it. The witnesses started recanting on a Friday, 12 days after the incident. It wasn't all of them, it was 3. A man named Gerald Potts, who'd been sitting 2 tables from the window, and a couple, the Delaney's, who'd been in a booth near the counter. All three had given informal statements to Mull within the first week saying they'd seen the altercation and that Tyler Ashford had thrown the first punch. All three now said they'd been uncertain, that it had happened fast, that they couldn't be sure of the sequence. Mull called Logan when the third recantation came in. "Potts owns a small landscaping company," she said. Her voice was flat with a kind of professional anger, the kind that had learned to stay quiet and keep moving. Cedar Fork National Bank holds his business loan. Douglas Ashford sits on the board of Cedar Fork National Bank. And the Delaney's? James Delaney applied for a variance last spring to expand his garage. It's been sitting with the county council for 6 months. Caroline Ashford sits on the county council. Logan sat with that for a moment. "Is there anything you can do?" he asked. "I can note that the recantations happened. I can note the timeline. I can note the relationships." A pause. "I can't prove a conversation happened. I can't prove anyone said anything directly. This is the part where it gets gray." "The footage," Logan said. "The footage is what it is," Mull said. "It doesn't lie. But footage without corroboration is a lot easier for a defense attorney to complicate than footage with 3 witnesses." "How's the footage looking? The quality?" "Good enough," she said, and there was something in her voice under the flatness, something that was almost satisfaction, held carefully in check. "The angle catches Tyler's swing clearly, catches your response, catches the fact that Hannah was already on the floor before any of it started. A beat. And something else." "What?" "One of Tyler's friends had his phone out," Mull said. "You mentioned it. The kid who was recording and then stopped. His name is Blake Mercer. His family is not the Ashfords. His father came into my office this morning without an attorney." Logan straightened. "Willingly?" "Willingly. Blake Mercer has been having second thoughts since the lawsuit was filed, and his father is a man who has a different read on things than Douglas Ashford. He says Blake has footage." "Of the assault." "Of the assault," Mull confirmed. "Of the moments before the lawsuit was filed, which included Tyler Ashford laughing and saying, and I'm quoting the father's paraphrase here, 'This is perfect. My dad's going to love this.'" Logan exhaled slowly through his nose. "So Tyler knew," Logan said. "Tyler knew," Mull said. "Or at minimum, Tyler saw an opportunity and reached for it. The attack on you wasn't just an impulsive swing, it was a move." She paused. "Blake Mercer is 17. His father is scared, but he came in anyway. That matters." "Yeah," Logan said. "It does." After he hung up, he stood in the kitchen for a while. Rex came and sat by his leg, which he did sometimes when Logan was still for too long, as if stillness meant something was wrong and proximity was the appropriate response. Logan reached down and scratched behind the dog's ear. He thought about Tyler Ashford saying, "This is perfect." He thought about what that meant. Not just about Tyler, who was 19 and had grown up watching power work like a muscle you flexed, but about the system that had made that sentence possible. The system where witnesses held business loans and zoning variances, and the truth was a resource that could be made expensive enough that people stopped reaching for it. And then he thought about Blake Mercer's father walking into a detective's office without a lawyer, about Hannah making the call to Mull from her car, about Renner driving 2 hours from Richmond. He thought about what it cost people to do things that should be free. The op-ed appeared in the Richmond Register 2 weeks after the civil suit was filed. Logan didn't write it. He didn't know it was coming. It was written by a woman named Dolores Vance, who had been a teacher at Cedar Fork Middle School for 22 years before retiring, and who, it turned out, had been sitting in a booth near the back of Patty's Diner that afternoon and had watched the whole thing from 20 feet away. She wrote about what she'd seen, not in legal language, not in careful qualified statements, but in the plain voice of a 67-year-old woman who had spent her career watching children learn either that the world was fair or that it wasn't, and who had decided after 2 weeks of watching the news coverage that she was done being quiet. She wrote about Tyler Ashford knocking the coffee out of Hannah's hand deliberately. She described the laughter. She described the phone being held up. She described the moment Logan walked in and what it looked like from where she was sitting for one person to decide to move when no one else would. She wrote, "I am ashamed that I did not stand up myself. I am 67 years old and I know better, and I sat there. I'm writing this now because it is the only apology I have left to offer." The piece was shared 40,000 times in 48 hours. Logan read it at the kitchen table the morning it went up, and he had to stop twice and look at something else, because reading the words of someone telling the truth with that particular weight of self-indictment was the kind of thing that caught in the chest if you weren't careful. He called Hannah. "I saw it," she said. "How are you?" A pause. "Someone put flowers outside the diner this morning," she said. "Anonymous. Just a bunch of grocery store flowers in a plastic sleeve sitting on the front step when the manager unlocked the door." Another pause. "He didn't throw them away." The manager. "Yeah." Her voice was quiet, careful, like she was holding something that might shift if she moved too fast. "He didn't throw them away, and he didn't say anything about it. He just moved them to the counter by the register." Logan didn't say anything. "I don't know what to do with this," Hannah said. It wasn't a complaint. It was genuine uncertainty. The uncertainty of someone whose framework for how the world worked was being adjusted in ways they hadn't prepared for. "You don't have to do anything with it," Logan said. "It just is what it is. People are calling the diner and asking for me by name. Not to harass, to say they believe me. A woman from Charlottesville called yesterday. She said something similar happened to her 2 years ago and she didn't say anything, and she wanted me to know she was glad I did." "That's going to keep happening," Logan said. "I know," she exhaled. "It's a lot." "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "How's your daughter?" The question surprised him, which he supposed it shouldn't have. "She's okay," he said. "She doesn't fully understand what's happening. She knows something is, but she's 7, and the main way she's processing it is by being very particular about what we have for dinner." Hannah made a small sound. Not quite a laugh, but close. "That's not a bad way to handle it." "No," Logan said. "It really isn't." He heard her breathe, then, "Renner wants to meet this week. She says there are things developing that we need to talk about in person." "I know, she called me too." "What do you think she found?" Logan looked out the kitchen window at the bare October field, the frost still on the grass in the shadow of the fence line where the sun hadn't reached yet. Somewhere out there was the whole machinery of what the Ashfords had built. The relationships, the leverage, the pattern of complaints that disappeared, and Renner had been pulling on threads, and Mull had been pulling on threads, and now there was something neither of them had expected. "I think," he said slowly, "that what happened at Patty's was small, and what's underneath it isn't." Hannah was quiet. "How do you feel about that?" he asked. Another long pause, and when she spoke, her voice had that same quality it had had the day he'd helped her up off the diner floor. Not fearlessness, because she wasn't fearless, but the particular quality of someone who has weighed the fear honestly and decided to move anyway. "Scared," she said, "but I've been scared before." Renner drove up on a Thursday with the accordion folder under her arm and the expression of someone who'd spent the past week not sleeping enough. She sat at Logan's kitchen table. It had become a kind of informal operations center by this point, the place where things got decided, and she spread out what she had without preamble. Logan stood at the counter. Mull sat across from Renner, her jacket still on, her coffee untouched. Hannah was in the chair at the end of the table, her hands around a mug, her sister Claire at home with a neighbor who'd offered to sit with her for the afternoon. It was the first time all 4 of them had been in the same room. Renner looked at each of them before she started. "What I'm about to tell you goes further than a civil suit," she said, "and further than a county cover-up. I want you to understand that before I say it, because once I say it, the decisions you make from here become more complicated." "Just say it," Hannah said. Renner nodded. She pulled a stack of printed pages from the folder. "Blake Mercer's phone footage was the thread," she said. "Not just because of Tyler's statement before the lawsuit, because of what else was on the phone." She slid a printed screenshot across the table. It showed a social media interface, not one of the major platforms, something Logan didn't immediately recognize. The account handle was a string of numbers. The profile image was blank. The post was a video clip, 12 seconds long in the still, and the thumbnail showed Hannah on the floor of Patty's diner. "It was uploaded within 4 minutes of the incident," Renner said. Logan looked at it. "Blake uploaded it?" "Blake didn't, Tyler did, from his phone, while Blake was still recording. Tyler had a secondary account on a platform called Drop Zone. It's fringe, mostly operates offshore, minimal content moderation." She tapped the paper. The post got 400 views in the first hour, not because Tyler had a big following, because he cross-posted it to a private group. Mull pulled the paper toward her. What kind of group? That's what took me a week to understand, Renner said. It's a closed group called The Gallery. Approximately 1,100 members. It operates on the premise of... She stopped and pressed her mouth into a thin line, choosing the next words deliberately. The members submit videos of what they call subjects. People in vulnerable, humiliating, or physically compromised situations. The videos are ranked by engagement. The top-ranked contributors earn credits, which can be converted to cash through a cryptocurrency exchange. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. They're monetizing it, Logan said. They've been monetizing it for at least 3 years, Renner said. Hannah wasn't the first. She was the 47th documented submission we've found so far. The subjects range from people experiencing mental health crises in public, to homeless individuals, to disabled people, to employees being harassed at work. She paused. The group has a particular preference for what the moderators internally call high-resistance subjects, people who fight back or try to maintain dignity. Those videos rank higher. Tyler specifically noted in his upload caption that Hannah was, and I'm translating from the shorthand they use, a high-value target. Hannah had not moved. Her hands were still around the mug. She was looking at the screenshot with an expression that Logan couldn't fully read. Not shock exactly, because somewhere underneath she had always known that the phone being pointed at her meant something beyond simple cruelty. But knowing the outline of something and seeing its actual dimensions were different experiences. He came back on purpose, she said. Her voice was flat. The submission logs we were able to access through Blake's phone show Tyler had submitted 2 prior videos from Patty's, Renner said, both featuring staff. Hannah appears in the background of one from 8 months ago. She was a known target before this incident. Logan looked at Hannah. She was still looking at the paper. A muscle in her jaw moved once. That was all. How many of these 47 victims have reported? Mull asked. As far as we can determine, 6 ever filed formal complaints. None of those complaints went anywhere. 2 were in this county. Renner paused. We believe at least some of the complaint failures in this county were facilitated by Deputy Carver, who we now know has a long-standing relationship with the Ashford family that predates his time on the force. He coached Tyler in youth lacrosse, as Hannah had noted. More importantly, Carver's brother-in-law works for an Ashford property management company. Mull's expression didn't change exactly, but something behind it went very still. This goes to federal jurisdiction, Logan said. It already has, Renner said. I made contact with an FBI field agent in Richmond on Tuesday. Her name is Special Agent Diane Ochoa. She's been building a case on the gallery for approximately 14 months. They've had it flagged as a cybercrime operation, but the interstate element was always the challenge. The Virginia victims give her the geographic breadcrumbs she needed to connect it to the broader network. Renner looked at Mull. Your preservation request on the diner footage was the first documented piece of evidence that survived in this county. Everything else was buried. You gave Ochoa something she could build from. Mull picked up her coffee for the first time and drank from it. Carver knows I've been looking, she said. He's going to know something shifted when the FBI makes contact. Ochoa is aware, Renner said. The contact with your department will be managed carefully. Logan was leaning forward now, arms on the table. He'd been in enough operational briefings to know when the picture being presented had more dimensions than the obvious ones, and he was seeing it now. The years of accumulated complaint failures, the deputy with the conflict of interest, the civil lawsuit that had seemed like a pressure campaign but was actually a distraction, and underneath all of it, a network that had been running quietly and profitably while the people it hurt tried to rebuild their lives without ever fully understanding what had been done to them. The civil suit, he said, Ashford filed it to control the narrative and buy time. But if Tyler's activities come out in connection with a federal investigation, the civil suit becomes a liability, Renner confirmed. Douglas Ashford may not have known the full extent of what Tyler was doing. We don't know that yet, but the moment the federal piece becomes public, his attorney's first move is going to be distance. They'll throw Tyler to the wolves, Hannah said quietly. Everyone looked at her. His own family, she said. They'll let him take it alone to protect the business. She said it without satisfaction, without cruelty, just as a statement of how the world worked at that level of wealth and exposure. Possibly, Renner said. That calculation is above our pay grade. What matters for your situation is that the civil suit against Logan is unlikely to survive contact with a federal investigation. And Hannah, the harassment pattern documented across 47 victims is going to make the Ashford attorney's attempt to paint you as unstable look very different to a jury. If it gets to a jury, Hannah said. If it gets to a jury, Renner agreed, which I actually don't think it will. Muz. The courtroom hearing on the civil suit was scheduled for a Monday, 3 weeks later, and Logan dressed for it the way he'd dressed for certain operations. Practically nothing he'd miss if it got ruined, shoes he could stand in for hours. He drove to the county courthouse in Cedar Fork with Renner in the passenger seat going over her notes. I need to tell you something, Renner said, not looking up from her phone. Okay. The Ashford attorney, his name is Ward Fuller, he's good. He's going to go after your service record. He'll have pulled everything that's publicly available, and he'll have filled in the gaps with implication. Questions about your discharge, about the nature of your work, about whether a man with your training exercised appropriate restraint. Did I exercise appropriate restraint? The footage shows you did, Renner said. Unambiguously, but that's not how Fuller's going to frame it. He's going to suggest that someone with your background has a different relationship to physical force than a civilian does. That what looks like restraint to the average person might actually be a trained, calibrated response that was still excessive. That's, Logan considered, that's actually a coherent argument. It's the only coherent argument he has, Renner said, which is why he'll work it hard. They pulled into the courthouse parking lot. It was cold, the kind of November cold that had settled in to stay, bare trees against a white-gray sky. What do you need me to do? Logan asked. Answer questions completely, and don't give him extra words to work with, Renner said. You know how to do that. I've been interrogated by people with considerably higher clearances than Ward Fuller. I know, she said. Don't remind the courtroom of that. The courtroom was small and smelled like old wood and central heating. The gallery held maybe 60 people, and it was full. Local press, community members, a few faces Logan recognized from the growing online coverage of the case. Dolores Vance, the retired teacher who'd written the op-ed, was in the third row. She caught Logan's eye as he came in and gave him a short, firm nod. Hannah was already there, sitting beside Renner's associate at the plaintiff's table. The civil suit had named Logan as defendant, which meant the seating arrangement placed them across the aisle from each other, which Logan found mildly absurd. She was wearing a dark blazer over a blouse, and she had her hair down for once, and she looked across the aisle at him as he sat, and her expression said, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. He nodded at her. Ward Fuller was exactly what Logan had expected. Well-dressed, composed, the kind of man who moved through institutions with the ease of someone who had never been denied entry to one. He was reviewing notes at his table without appearing to review them, the performance of casual preparedness. Douglas Ashford was in the gallery, front row, in a charcoal suit. He sat with the very specific posture of a man who expected the room to be aware of him. Tyler was not present. Logan had heard from Renner that morning that Tyler had been advised by his own separate counsel not to attend. That detail, small as it was, told Logan everything about which direction the Ashford family's strategy was beginning to move. The hearing was preliminary, arguments over the preservation of evidence, questions of standing, the framework the judge would use to evaluate the core claims. It was not a trial, but it was the first time everything was in the same room, and rooms had their own logic. The judge was a woman named Ellen Marsh, mid-50s, who had the economical manner of someone who'd heard every version of every argument and had developed a brisk impatience with repetition. She moved through procedural matters quickly and efficiently, and when Fuller rose to address the court, she gave him the look of a person who was willing to listen and had a limited supply of time in which to do so. Fuller was smooth. Logan gave him that. He laid out the civil case with the practiced efficiency of someone who had reduced a complicated situation to its simplest advantageous shape. A young man with no prior criminal record, son of a prominent family, had been subjected to a physical attack by a man with a history of trained violence, in a public setting, with witnesses who corroborated his client's version. He used the word disproportionate 4 times in 6 minutes. Then he pivoted to Hannah, the individual at the center of the alleged instigation, Fuller said. using alleged with the weight of someone who knew exactly how much work a single word could do, has a documented history of workplace disputes, and has, since the incident, benefited financially from the public attention surrounding this case. He held up a printed page. Donations to a crowdfunding campaign in Ms. Pierce's name have reached over $42,000 in the past month. We would suggest that the question of motive, Ms. Pierce is not a named party in this proceeding, Judge Marsh said. Fuller adjusted without breaking stride. Your Honor, the characterization of events that forms the basis of the defendant's justification relies entirely on Ms. Pierce's version. Then address the footage, Marsh said. Fuller paused, just briefly. The footage, he said, captures a physical interaction. What it does not capture is context. It does not capture... Mr. Fuller, Marsh said, I've reviewed the footage. I'd encourage you to speak to what it shows rather than what it doesn't. Something shifted in the room. Not dramatically. It wasn't a movie moment. Nobody gasped. But the air changed slightly, the way air changes when a current shifts direction. Logan sat still. Renner, beside him, was writing something on her notepad. Fuller recalibrated. He moved to Logan's military background with practiced ease, framing it exactly the way Renner had predicted. The suggestion that Logan's training constituted a different category of physical capability, that the standard of appropriate response couldn't be the same for a Navy SEAL as for a civilian, that what looked like restraint from the outside might reflect a different internal calculus. It was a coherent argument. Logan sat with it. When Renner addressed the court, she was brief. She directed the judge's attention to 3 specific timestamps in the footage. She noted that Tyler Ashford had initiated physical contact. She noted that Logan's response had resulted in 0 injuries to Tyler Ashford, a fact confirmed by the paramedics Ashford's attorney had arranged to be present at the scene, which she noted with the dry observation that someone had been confident enough in their version of events to call for medical personnel before the lawsuit was filed. She noted that 6 character witnesses had submitted affidavits describing Logan's conduct in situations requiring physical judgment, all of which described consistent, proportional responses. She did not say anything about the gallery or the federal investigation because Ochoa had asked them not to. Judge Marsh asked 2 questions, both directed at Fuller, both about the footage. Fuller answered them with the precision of a man navigating a narrowing corridor. The hearing lasted 4 hours, with a recess. When it reconvened, Marsh gave her preliminary ruling in the particular flat legal language that stripped drama from things that were actually significant. The civil suit could proceed to the next stage, but the standard of evidence required would be governed by the footage as primary, not testimonial account. Witnesses who had amended their accounts would be subject to cross-examination on the amendments. It wasn't a win. It wasn't a loss. It was the door being held at a specific width. Renner leaned toward Logan. "That's better than I expected from this hearing," she said quietly. Logan said nothing. He was watching Douglas Ashford across the room. The man had the expression of someone reading a document that was telling him something he didn't want to accept. Not panic, not yet, but the early awareness of something coming apart. Hannah was waiting outside on the courthouse steps when Logan came out. The cold hit him when the door opened, sharp and clean, and she was standing with her hands in her coat pockets, looking out at the parking lot. "How are you?" he asked. "Ask me in an hour," she said. "Right now I'm still in the part where I'm keeping it together." He stood next to her. They watched a TV news camera on the steps below doing a stand-up with a reporter Logan didn't recognize. "Fuller said $42,000, Hannah said. "I heard." "I didn't know it was that much." She said it quietly. "I knew the donations had come in, but I hadn't checked in a few days." She shook her head slowly. "Claire's chair is $6,000. I've been thinking about $6,000 for 8 months. And there's $42,000 in an account with my name on it." She paused. "I don't know what to do with the rest." "You'll figure that out," Logan said. "Renner wants to talk about setting up something formal," Hannah said. "A non-profit structure. She thinks there are other victims from the gallery who have nowhere to go." She turned to look at him. "That's what I mean when I say I don't know what to do with the rest. Not the money. The rest of all of this." Logan understood what she meant. The weight of a thing that had started as one woman on a diner floor and had become something else. The way it pulled forward. "You don't have to decide that today," he said. "I know." She looked back at the parking lot. A woman was walking toward the courthouse with a child on her hip, the child grabbing at her scarf. Hannah watched them. Claire's going to want to know every detail. She follows every article. She's been calling me after every update. A small, complicated sound. She told me last week that she's proud of me, and I had to go into the bathroom and run the water because I didn't want her to hear. Logan looked at her. She doesn't get proud of me often, Hannah said. I mean, she is. I know she is, but she doesn't say it because she carries this thing about being a burden, about me working doubles and the medical bills and the chair. She doesn't say it because she doesn't want me to feel like I'm being guilted into anything. She stopped. For her to say it without any of that attached, just, I'm proud of you. She shook her head. Logan didn't say anything for a moment. You're going to win this, he said finally. Not as encouragement, not as hollow reassurance, as an assessment of what he actually believed. She looked at him. You don't know that. I've been in situations where the outcome wasn't certain, he said. I know what it feels like to be on the wrong side of the odds. This isn't that. The footage is real. The pattern is real. The federal investigation is real. The only thing holding the other side together is money and time, and both of those are running out. Things go wrong, Hannah said. Yes, he said. They do. She was quiet. Then, but you still think we're going to win? Yeah, he said. I do. She exhaled through her nose, a long breath that steamed slightly in the cold air, and looked out at the parking lot again. Then she said, I need to eat something. I haven't eaten since 6 this morning, and if I talk to one more person on an empty stomach, I'm going to say something I regret. Logan almost laughed. There's a diner on Route 12. She gave him a look. Not a diner. Fair. They walked down the courthouse steps together, past the TV camera, past the reporter doing her stand-up, past the small cluster of people who recognized them and made space. A woman touched Hannah's arm as they passed and said simply, thank you. And Hannah said thank you back. And they kept walking, and Logan didn't say anything about the moment because some things were better left exactly as they were. 3 days after the hearing, Special Agent Diane Ochoa arrived in Cedar Fork. She didn't make a press statement. She didn't meet with the Ashford family's attorney. She drove a government-issue sedan to the Cedar Fork Sheriff's Department and spent 4 hours with Karen Mull going through 19 months of files. And when she left, she took 2 boxes of documents with her. Renner called Logan that evening. It's moving, she said. How fast? Fast enough that the Ashford attorney filed a motion to withdraw from the civil suit this afternoon. Logan sat down. Fuller withdrew. Filed the motion, citing irreconcilable differences in litigation strategy, which is attorney language for my client, is about to become a significant liability. A pause. Douglas Ashford has his own attorney now, separate from Tyler, separate from the family. That happened 2 days ago. They're separating their exposure. Everyone's separating from everyone, Renner said. Deputy Carver called in sick today, and his union rep requested a meeting with the department chief, which means Carver's lawyer told him something this week that changed his calculations. Logan leaned back. Through the kitchen window, the November dark had come early, the way it did now, and the outdoor light was on over the porch and throwing a square of yellow onto the dead grass. He could hear Maisie upstairs, the particular rhythm of her moving around her room before bed. Ochoa wants to meet with Hannah, Renner said, and with you. She wants to formalize your witness statements under federal case protocols. When? Friday. Tell her yes. After he hung up, he sat with the phone in his hand for a while. The thing that was happening was real. He could feel its momentum, the gathering weight of evidence and testimony and institutional attention that, once it reached a certain mass, became very hard to stop. He'd seen it in other contexts, the point at which the people who'd been holding things in place started calculating their own exits instead. He thought about Tyler Ashford saying, "This is perfect. My dad's going to love this." A 19-year-old boy in a lacrosse jersey who had filmed a woman on the floor and turned it into currency, who had grown up in a world where power moved like weather, ambient, unchosen, simply there, and had understood by some early instinct how to use it and never thought to ask whether he should. Logan didn't feel sorry for him. He tried to, in the way he tried to be fair about people, to see the full shape of how someone became who they were. He couldn't get there, not all the way. Maybe he would eventually. What he felt instead was something simpler and less satisfying. The recognition that Tyler Ashford was going to face consequences that the 46 people before Hannah had not been able to make stick, and that the reason they'd stick now had everything to do with timing and accumulated evidence, and a retired teacher writing an op-ed, and a father bringing his son's phone to a detective's office. Small, specific, human decisions made by people who were scared but moved anyway. He went upstairs to say goodnight to his daughter. Maisie was in bed with a book. Rex sprawled across the foot of the mattress with the satisfied heaviness of a dog who has achieved his optimal position in life. The room smelled like the lavender shampoo Maisie insisted on, and something else, maybe the wood of the old house settling in the cold. "Hey," Logan said. "Hey." She held up the book. It was a chapter book about a girl who discovered her grandmother had been a spy during World War II. She'd been working through it for a week. "The grandmother actually did it," Maisie said. "She wasn't just pretending." Logan said. "The whole town thought she was just a baker," Maisie said. "But she was actually helping people escape. Nobody knew." "Does it matter?" Logan asked. "Whether they knew?" Maisie considered this seriously. "I think it mattered to her," she said finally. "Not for being famous, just she knew. She knew what she did." She looked at Logan. "Is that what you mean?" "Yeah," he said. "That's what I mean." She looked at her book for a moment, then back at him. "Is the thing you're doing going to be okay?" "Yeah," he said. "You keep saying yeah to that question." "Because I keep meaning it," he said. She seemed to accept that. She settled back against her pillow, and he pulled the blanket up, and Rex made a small discontented sound at the rearrangement and settled again. Logan turned off the lamp. "Dad," Maisie said in the dark. "Yeah." "The people you're helping, are they going to be okay too?" Logan stood in the doorway. Through the window at the end of the hall, the outdoor light was still throwing its yellow square onto the frost-covered grass, and beyond that the field was dark and quiet. "They're going to have to work for it," he said. "But, yeah, I think so." He heard her turn over, the particular creak of the old mattress. Then quiet. He stood there for another moment. A man who had come home from somewhere hard and built something small and careful and imperfect on 6 acres of Virginia grass, who had walked into a diner one October afternoon and made a choice that had cost him things he didn't yet know the full price of, and who was standing in a dark hallway thinking about 47 people whose names he didn't all know yet, and a woman with her sister's wheelchair money in a nonprofit account, and a detective who had waited 4 years for the right thread to pull. The outdoor light flickered once, caught itself, held. Logan went downstairs and locked the door. The federal indictments came down on a Tuesday in February, 4 months after Logan had walked into Patty's diner. He found out the way the rest of Cedar Fork found out. A news alert on his phone at 6:47 in the morning while he was making Maisie's lunch. The headline read, "FBI dismantles nationwide cyberbullying network. Virginia man among those charged." He set down the knife he'd been using to cut an apple, read the piece through once, then called Renner. She picked up on the first ring. "I know," she said. "Tyler's named." Tyler, 2 co-administrators of the gallery, and 9 additional contributors across 6 states. A pause. "Douglas Ashford is not named, not yet. But the FBI's press statement includes language about ongoing investigation into enabling parties and institutional facilitation, which is not accidental language." Logan leaned against the kitchen counter. Through the window, February had bleached everything to gray and white, the fields flat and dead under a low sky. He'd lived through 3 Virginia winters now. He was still not entirely reconciled to them. "How's Hannah?" "I talked to her 20 minutes ago. She's processing." Another pause. "She's been waiting for this for 4 months, and now that it's here, I think she doesn't quite know what to do with the fact that she's still standing." "I know that feeling," he said. He did. He knew it very specifically. The strange flatness that followed a sustained period of high alertness, the way the body and the mind had been running at a particular pitch for so long that when the immediate pressure released, what replaced it wasn't relief but a kind of disorientation. You kept waiting for the next thing, the next threat, the next complication, the next phone call that changed the shape of the situation. He drove Maisie to school, came back, and spent the morning reading every word of the federal indictment documents that Renner forwarded to him. The gallery had been operational for 3 years and 4 months. It had 1,112 registered members at the time of the FBI's infiltration. 43% of those members had contributed at least one piece of content. The network had generated, through its credit-to-cryptocurrency conversion system, approximately $340,000 in distributed payments across its contributing membership. Tyler Ashford had received $4,200 over 11 months of contributions. He was listed as a Tier 2 contributor, which the indictment documents defined as someone who had submitted more than 10 pieces of content rated above a certain engagement threshold. Logan sat with that number for a while. $4,200, the price of Hannah Pierce's humiliation and the humiliation of 46 other people, and all the people whose videos had never been connected to the network but existed somewhere in its archive. He thought about Hannah working doubles to save $40 a week toward a $6,000 wheelchair. He closed the laptop and went outside and split wood for an hour, which was not something he needed to do because he had enough cut wood stacked on the porch to last 2 more months, but which was what he did when he needed to put his body to work while his mind dealt with something. The civil suit was formally withdrawn the following week. Ward Fuller filed the dismissal paperwork and issued a statement on behalf of the Ashford family that described the withdrawal as a recognition that the legal landscape had changed significantly, language so careful it barely existed. Douglas Ashford did not comment publicly. His wife Caroline resigned from the county council citing family health concerns, which everyone understood and no one said directly. Deputy Carver was placed on administrative leave pending an internal affairs investigation that, Mull told Logan privately, was substantially supported by the documentary evidence the FBI's discovery process had surfaced about interference with prior complaints. 2 of those complaints had been formally reinvestigated. In one of them, the community college student who'd been followed in the parking lot, the amended record now showed that Carver had contacted her personally 3 days after she'd filed the report, identifying himself as a friend of the Ashford family and asking her whether she was certain she wanted to put a young man's future at risk over a misunderstanding. The girl, her name was Melissa Tran, she was 24, she was a nursing student, had withdrawn the complaint the same week. Melissa Tran was now cooperating with the federal investigation. Logan found all of this out in pieces, the way you find out about things that happen inside institutions. Through Renner, through Mull, through the news coverage that was now national and constant, and that had taken on the particular breathless quality of a story that was delivering new information faster than the press could digest it. He had 3 separate interview requests from cable news programs. He declined all of them. Hannah did one interview. She chose carefully. A journalist named Sue Jin Park, who had been covering harassment networks for 3 years and who had reached out through Renner with a specific proposal. Not a victim story, but a systemic analysis, with Hannah as a person who understood the system from the inside. The piece ran in a national magazine and was 4,000 words long and described Hannah in its opening paragraph as a woman who survived something designed to make survival feel like a personal failure. Hannah texted Logan the morning it ran. She got it right. He texted back, "I know." He'd read it 3 times. Guiches. The criminal case against Tyler Ashford moved through the federal system with the particular speed of cases where the evidence is extensive and the defendant's counsel understands that cooperation has value. Tyler entered a guilty plea on 4 of the 7 charges against him in March. The sentencing was scheduled for May. Douglas Ashford was named in a civil RICO complaint filed by attorneys representing 22 of the 47 identified victims in April. The complaint alleged that Ashford's knowledge of his son's activities and his subsequent use of legal and institutional resources to suppress the initial investigation made him a party to the broader pattern of racketeering. Renner was one of 6 attorneys on the filing. She'd spent her own money on the preparation costs, which Logan knew because she told him directly and without embarrassment, the way she did everything. "You didn't have to do that," Logan said. "I know," she said. "I wanted to." "Why?" A pause. "Because I spent 10 years doing corporate work," Renner said, "and I was good at it. And one day I sat across a conference table from an executive who was very cheerfully explaining to me how a settlement agreement would effectively prevent 8 former employees from finding work in their industry again. And I thought, I've been on the wrong side of tables. She paused. I'm not trying to be heroic. I'm just tired of being on the wrong side. Logan didn't say anything for a moment. How's your firm taking it? My firm can deal with it, she said, which meant it was complicated and she'd chosen her position. Sharon. Logan got the call from his former commanding officer on a Thursday in April. Captain David Reyes called from a number Logan recognized, which meant it was personal rather than institutional. Logan. Reyes had a voice that hadn't changed in 16 years, a low, unhurried quality that meant he was either relaxed or very much not, and you had to read the context to know which. Sir. Sit down. Logan was already sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold beside him. What is it? Your consulting contract renewal. A pause. I've been told it's not going to be approved. Logan was quiet. There's nothing official, Reyes said. No written record. The recommendation came from above me, and I was told it had to do with ongoing media attention and the perception that your profile had become inconsistent with the confidentiality requirements of the contract. Another pause. I pushed back, twice. I'm telling you, I pushed back. I know you did, Logan said. Logan, it's okay, Logan said. It's not. No, Logan said. It's not, but it's what it is. He picked up the coffee, looked at it, set it back down. Was it Ashford? I don't know where it originated, Reyes said. I genuinely don't. It may have had nothing to do with Ashford and everything to do with someone at the Pentagon who doesn't want the associated coverage. It may be both. I can't get a clean answer. Logan sat with that. The consulting work had been 60% of his income. The farmhouse lease was month to month. Maisie's school was public, which was a small practical mercy. Thank you for calling personally, Logan said. Don't thank me, Reyes said. I didn't do enough. A short pause. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, Logan said. Something. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. After he hung up, he sat at the table for a long time. The February cold had finally broken into a pale early April warmth that hadn't made up its mind about itself. And through the kitchen window, he could see the field starting to show the first colorless suggestion of new grass. And Rex was in his spot by the fence with the slow contentment of a dog for whom the world's return to warmth was a personal event. He didn't feel sorry for himself. He tried on the feeling briefly, the way you try on a coat that doesn't fit, and then set it aside. This was the cost. He'd known going in that there would be one, even if he hadn't known its specific shape. The contract was the shape. He could live with it. The question was what came next. He called his sister Dana. I heard, she said, because Dana had sources Logan never entirely tracked. Do you? Reyes's aide called someone I know. I'm sorry, Logan. Don't be. He watched Rex in the yard. I need to think about something. Can I come over this weekend? Bring Maisie? Of course. I need to talk through an idea. What kind of idea? The kind that doesn't have a business plan yet, he said. On. He drove to Hannah's apartment on a Saturday in late April. He'd been there twice before, once to drop off documents Renner had needed Hannah to sign, once to meet Claire, which was a separate story that deserved its own accounting. He parked on the street in front of the brick building and sat in the truck for a moment. The neighborhood was not a bad one, not a good one. It was the kind of neighborhood that had been built for utility and had aged into something that was mostly fine except when it wasn't. The building had a front door that stuck and an elevator that was theoretical. Hannah had a second-floor apartment with a view of the parking lot and a bathroom she'd modified herself with a portable grab bar and a shower seat for Claire. He buzzed up. She answered the door in jeans and an old university sweatshirt with a paint stain on the left sleeve that he was fairly certain predated her time at this university. Coffee's on, she said. The apartment was small and organized with the precision of people who didn't have room to waste. Claire's things were accommodated throughout, without the space feeling like it had been arranged around a disability. It had been arranged around a person. A photograph was on the wall near the door of the two sisters at what looked like the ocean. both of them younger, both squinting into sun and laughing at something outside the frame. Claire was in the living room in the new wheelchair, which had arrived 6 weeks ago, and which she had described to Logan on his first visit, with the specific enthusiasm of someone explaining a vehicle they'd waited a long time for. It was smaller and lighter than the previous one and turned properly at corners, which the old one hadn't. She was reading something on a tablet. "Logan," she said, looking up. She had Hannah's eyes and Hannah's directness and an additional quality, a kind of frank observational warmth, that Logan had noticed the first time and thought about since. "Claire," he said. "Sit down." Hannah made real coffee for once instead of the instant. "I always make real coffee," Hannah said from the kitchen. "The jar with the brown lid is not real coffee," Claire called back. She looked at Logan. "Has she told you about the job offer?" Logan looked toward the kitchen. "No." Hannah appeared in the doorway. She looked at Claire with an expression that said they would be discussing this later. "I was going to tell him. I sped up the timeline," Claire said. "What job offer?" Logan asked. Hannah came and sat on the arm of the couch. She did that, chose the arm of furniture over the seat of it, something Logan had noticed and thought was either a habit of movement or a preparedness, a posture that kept her ready to stand. Soo-Jin Park, the journalist who wrote the piece, she connected me with an organization in Richmond. They run advocacy work for harassment victims. They want a program coordinator, someone who can speak to the experience from the inside and help build out a support infrastructure. "It pays $12,000 more than Patty's," Claire said. "Claire." "Relevant information," Claire said, returning to her tablet. Logan looked at Hannah. "Are you going to take it?" She looked at her coffee. "I'm thinking about it." "What's to think about?" "I've never done that kind of work." She paused. "I've never done any work except service industry work. I don't have a degree. I don't have the vocabulary they use in nonprofit spaces. I'd be walking into rooms full of people who went to school for this and explaining things from—" She stopped. "From being the person it happened to." "That's not a lesser qualification," Logan said. "I know that rationally," she said. "I don't always know it the other way." He nodded. He understood the other way. He'd lived in it for a period after he'd come home from the service. The disorientation of credentials that didn't translate, of knowing things that couldn't be put on a resume in any form that civilians recognized. "Take the job," he said. She looked at him. "You know what nobody in that office knows from a textbook," he said. "You know what it costs to decide to tell the truth when everything around you is designed to make that too expensive. That's not something they teach." A silence. Claire, across the room, turned a page on her tablet with the careful neutrality of someone who was absolutely listening. "You're biased," Hannah said. "Yeah," Logan said. "Doesn't make me wrong." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did you come here to talk about?" He told her about the contract. She listened without interrupting, which was one of the things he'd learned about her. She listened fully, without filling the silence with reassurance or premature reaction. When he finished, she said, "I'm sorry." "I'm not," he said, and meant it, mostly. "What are you going to do?" He'd been rolling this around since the phone call with Reyes, and in his conversation with Dana over the weekend, and in the long hours of the nights when Maisie was asleep and the house was quiet, and he sat at the kitchen table with the various pieces of what came next laid out in his mind. "Dana has contacts in the victim services space," he said. "She's been doing crisis intervention work for 12 years. She knows how these organizations are built." He paused. "The 47 people from the gallery. Most of them still have nowhere to go. Not really. They've got the federal case moving forward, but the federal case is about prosecution. It's not about them. Someone needs to build the part that's about them." Hannah was very still. "I'm thinking about a foundation," Logan said. "Not a big thing, not immediately. Something that connects victims of this kind of harassment to legal resources, to advocacy, to each other. Something that takes the pattern Renner documented and uses it to build a structure people can find when they need it." He paused. "I don't know how to do that yet. I know how to assess situations, how to work in teams with specific goals, how to train people to respond under pressure. I don't know nonprofits. I don't know fundraising. But you know someone who's about to start working in exactly that space," Hannah said. He looked at her. She looked back at him. Something in her expression had shifted, not surprise because she'd been around him long enough to know how he thought, but something that was taking in the full shape of the idea and turning it in the light. "That's why you came here today," she said. "Partly," he said. "Partly I just came here." A short silence. "Just came here," she said. "Yeah." He watched her process that. Hannah Pierce processed things openly, which was one of the things about her that was unlike almost everyone he knew. She didn't hide the work. He could see her deciding whether the partly just coming here was something she was going to address now or later, and he watched her file it away for later with the careful practicality of a woman who had learned to deal with one thing at a time. "The foundation idea is good," she said. "It needs someone who understands nonprofit structure. Renner knows people. Renner knows everyone." A pause. "You'd need funding." "First year could be modest," Logan said. "The crowdfunding donations that came in for you, you said you were thinking about a structure." "I said Renner suggested one," Hannah said. "Same thing." "It's not the same thing," she said, but the corner of her mouth moved. "Will you think about it?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. The apartment was quiet, except for the sound of the street below and the faint ambient noise of Claire's tablet. The afternoon light came through the window at a low angle, the particular quality of late April sun that was trying hard and not quite warm enough yet. "Yeah," she said. "I'll think about it." "That's enough," he said. Tyler Ashford was sentenced in May. Federal sentencing on 4 counts related to cybercrime, harassment, and participation in a criminal enterprise. The judge sentenced him to 32 months in a federal correctional facility, 3 years of supervised release, and mandatory restitution payments to documented victims that Renner's team had calculated at $67,000, to be distributed across 22 of the 47 identified individuals. Logan didn't go to the sentencing. Neither did Hannah. They knew about it the same way they knew about most of the proceedings' outcomes, through Renner's texts and the news alerts on their phones. Renner's text read, 32 months. Restitution ordered. Fuller was not in the room. "I thought you should hear that part specifically." Logan read it twice. The fact that Ward Fuller, Douglas Ashford's attorney, the man who had stood in a Virginia courtroom and used the word disproportionate 4 times in 6 minutes, had not appeared in the federal sentencing was a specific kind of statement. It meant the Ashford family's legal positioning had evolved to the point where Tyler's sentencing was something to be distanced from, not managed. It meant the RICO civil complaint had changed what being connected to Tyler Ashford cost. Douglas Ashford's deposition in the civil complaint was scheduled for July. That deposition, and what it produced, was still ahead. The work was not over. But something had finished. Not cleanly. Things that took years to build don't finish cleanly. But something had resolved into a different shape than it had held for a long time. Logan was in the parking lot of Maisie's school when he read the text, waiting for the afternoon bell. He sat in the truck with the engine off and the windows cracked and the May air coming in, which smelled like cut grass and the particular sweetness of spring in a county that hadn't finished warming up yet. His phone rang. Not Renner, not Hannah. It was Angela. "I saw the sentencing," his ex-wife said. She sounded different than she usually did on their Sunday calls. Less careful, less managed. Something in her voice was less armored. "I've been following the whole thing. I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say, but I wanted to call." "Angela, I'm not calling to—" "It's not a thing," she said, in the particular way she said things when she needed to establish up front that they meant exactly what she said and nothing more. "I just wanted to say that what you did, from the beginning, all of it." She stopped. "Maisie's going to know this story when she's older, the whole thing, and she's going to understand who her father is." Logan looked at the school building. The bell hadn't rung yet. Through the front windows, he could see the blurred shapes of kids at their desks. "Thank you," he said. "Is she happy?" Angela asked. Is she okay here?" "She named every room in the house," Logan said. A short silence. Then Angela laughed. A real laugh. The particular laugh he remembered. The one she'd had before things got complicated, before they both got too tired to be who they were with each other. Of course she did. She's good, Logan said. She's really good. Okay, Angela said. Okay, that's enough. The bell rang. The front doors of the school opened and kids came out in the particular way kids come out of school. In a rush, all at once, the energy of 6 hours of containment releasing into the open air. Logan watched for Maisie. He found her the way he always found her in a crowd. She moved with her chin up, looking around, the way a kid who'd moved several times learns to orient quickly in open space. She had her backpack on both shoulders and a piece of paper in her hand that she was protecting from the wind. She spotted the truck and cut across the stream of kids toward him. He got out. I drew Rex, she said, holding up the paper before she'd finished walking to him. It was a crayon drawing. Rex in the yard, his gray muzzle depicted faithfully, his large dog body rendered with the specific energy of a 7-year-old who had opinions about color. Around Rex, she'd drawn the field, the fence, the house. The sky was the particular blue of a child who had chosen the best crayon. It's for the kitchen, she said, for the wall. Logan took it carefully. He looked at it for a moment. The house, the dog, the field, the sky. It's perfect, he said. She gave him the look she reserved for when he said something she suspected of being parental diplomacy. You always say that. I mean it this time, he said. She looked at the drawing critically for another moment, decided he was probably right, and got in the truck. Logan folded the drawing carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He drove home through the May afternoon, Maisie in the passenger seat, explaining the entire day with the comprehensive thoroughness of a child who considers no detail too small. Rex's head between them from the back seat, the windows down, the spring air running through the truck like it owned it. The house was where he'd left it. 6 acres, a barn that needed work he kept meaning to do, the outdoor fire pit he'd finally cleaned out 3 weeks ago, the field that had been dead all winter and was now, unmistakably, beginning. Logan pulled into the drive and sat there for a moment after he killed the engine. Dad? Maisie said. Yeah. Can we have pasta tonight, the one with the green lid? Yeah, he said. We can do that. She got out. Rex followed. Logan sat for one more moment in the quiet of the truck, with the drawing in his pocket and the field in front of him and the May air coming through the open window. He thought about something Renner had said to him once, early on, when the civil suit had just been filed and the shape of things was still unclear. You don't get to choose what it costs. You only get to choose whether it was worth it. He got out of the truck. He thought, yes, without hesitation, without caveat, without the exhausted arithmetic of a man calculating what he'd lost against what he'd kept. Yes. He went inside and started the water for pasta. The foundation didn't have a name for the first 3 months. That bothered Hannah more than it bothered Logan, which was itself a kind of telling. She was the one who understood that a thing without a name was hard to explain to the people who needed it, and he was the one who kept saying the name would come when the work was clear enough to name it. They argued about this twice, which was how they argued about most things, directly, without cruelty, and with a stubbornness on both sides that neither of them fully recognized in themselves. The work started before the name. That was Logan's position, and it was probably right, even if it was also convenient. In the summer after Tyler's sentencing, Logan and Dana converted the farmhouse's spare room into something that was not yet an office, but was more than a kitchen table. 2 desks. A filing cabinet Dana had rescued from a church sale for $30. A whiteboard on the wall that Maisie had decorated along the bottom edge with a crayon border of dogs and grass before Logan had been able to use it for anything else, and which he'd decided to leave. The first thing they did was make a list. Not of goals or mission statements or the language that went on grant applications, but of names. The 47 people from the gallery whose identities the federal case had made available to victim advocates. Logan went through Renner's documentation and wrote every name by hand on a legal pad, 1 per line, because he thought it mattered to do it that way, to make each one a specific person on a specific line rather than a number in a database. 47 lines. He sat with that for a while. Dana, who had done crisis intervention work long enough to know what it looked like when someone needed to sit with something, made coffee, and didn't say anything until he put the pad down. Okay, she said then. Where do we start? They started with the 6 who had filed formal complaints that went nowhere. Those were the ones with documented paper trails, the ones for whom the federal case had already created a framework of acknowledgement. Those were also the ones, Renner had told them, most likely to be in a place where they could receive outreach without it feeling like another intrusion. Logan made calls. Not all of them went well. 2 people didn't answer and didn't call back. One woman answered and listened for 90 seconds, and then said, quietly and without anger, that she appreciated the call, but she was done with all of it. She just wanted to move forward, and Logan said he understood and meant it, and that was that. One man talked for 40 minutes and cried twice, and said he'd been waiting for someone to acknowledge that what happened to him was real. Logan called Hannah after that one. He said he'd been waiting for someone to say it was real, Logan told her. A silence on her end. How long ago did it happen to him? 2 years? 2 years of not knowing if it counted, she said. Her voice was quiet and specific, the way it got when something landed close. Yeah, that's the thing we're building against, she said, not just the legal piece. The 2 years of wondering if you're allowed to call it what it was. Logan was quiet. That's the name, Hannah said. He waited. Call it real, she said, the real foundation. Because that's what people need first, just someone to say, yes, this happened, and it was real, and you're not wrong about what it was. Logan looked at the whiteboard with Maisie's crayon dogs along the bottom. He looked at the 47 names on the legal pad. Yeah, he said. That's the name. Hannah took the program coordinator position in Richmond in June. She drove 40 minutes each way, which she had calculated was manageable, given the flexibility the role allowed. Claire had a home health aide 3 mornings a week now, funded partly by the restitution payment that had come through from the federal case, partly by the restructured medical assistance application that a social worker Renner had connected them with had helped them navigate. It was not a perfect situation. The aide was not always the same person, which Claire found genuinely difficult, and the drive to Richmond ate into the time Hannah used to have for the things she did to maintain her own equilibrium, like the Saturday morning walks she'd been taking for 3 years, and now frequently skipped. Hannah didn't talk about that last part often. She talked about work, about the cases she was seeing at the Richmond organization, about the structural gaps she was learning to identify between what harassment victims needed and what existing systems were designed to provide. She talked about Claire's good weeks and Claire's hard weeks with a frankness that had always been her way. Not asking for responses, not building toward anything, just stating the true version of things because she'd learned too young what it cost to maintain a false one. She and Logan talked most evenings. This had developed gradually over the spring, and by summer was simply the structure of their days, a conversation that could run 20 minutes or 2 hours depending on what there was to say and what there wasn't. It was not romantic in the way of beginnings. No one was performing, no one was constructing a version of themselves. It was something that arrived sideways, the way certain things do, through the accumulated weight of having been through something real together and having remained, on the other side of it, still interested in what the other person thought. Logan was aware of this. He was also aware that Hannah was aware of it and was approaching it with the same careful deliberateness she brought to everything that mattered. He had learned in the months since the diner that Hannah Pierce moved toward things she wanted with patience and without apology and without false urgency. He had decided this was the right way to move. He told Dana this one Saturday in August while they were sitting on Logan's porch. Dana looked at him for a moment. "Are you describing a philosophy?" she said. "Or are you telling me something specific?" "Both," he said. Dana drank her coffee. "Does she know you think about it this way?" "Probably," Logan said. "That's not a yes." "I know." "Logan." "I know," he said again. He looked out at the field, which was at its summer fullest, the grass long and going to seed along the fence line, Rex making his slow circuit in the afternoon heat with the dedicated aimlessness of an old dog on a good day. "She's been through a lot," Dana said. "She has." "You both have." "Dana, I'm just saying that 2 careful people who've both learned to be careful for good reasons don't automatically end up—" "I know that too," Logan said. His sister looked at him. She was 2 years older than him and had his mother's patience and his father's directness, which was an unusual combination that worked. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Eventually," Logan said, "tell her." "Eventually when?" He considered. when the timing isn't complicated by a federal case, an active nonprofit launch, and her first 6 months in a new job. Dana thought about this. That's actually reasonable, she said reluctantly. Thank you, he said. It's the first reasonable thing you've said about it. Also thank you, he said. The Real Foundation's first formal program launched in September, a legal navigation service for harassment victims in Virginia, connecting people in the early stages of deciding whether to come forward with pro bono attorneys and with people who had been through the process and could speak to what it actually looked like from the inside. Hannah co-designed the peer support component from Richmond based on what she'd learned in her first months at the advocacy organization. Logan ran operations out of the farmhouse office. Renner served on the board, as did Dana and a man named Marcus Webb, who had been one of the 47 gallery victims and who had, in the months since the federal case, quietly become one of the most methodical and clear-eyed people Logan had encountered in a long time. Marcus was from Norfolk. He was 38, taught high school history, and had been submitted to the gallery 2 years prior by a group of teenagers he'd confronted about harassing a student in a school parking lot. The video of him being surrounded, threatened, and eventually struck by one of the kids had earned Tyler Ashford's network significant engagement. Marcus had filed a complaint. The complaint had been handled by a department with no apparent connection to the Ashford family, and it had still gone nowhere because the system for investigating what the gallery was doing hadn't existed yet. Marcus sat in Logan's kitchen the first time they met and drank his coffee and said, "I knew 2 days after I filed that nothing was going to happen. I just knew. The way you know when an institution has already decided it's not worth the trouble." He paused. "What I couldn't understand for a long time was whether I was right to try anyway." "Were you?" Logan asked. "I don't know," Marcus said. "It didn't do anything at the time. But the complaint is in the federal file now. It's one of the documented prior failures. So in some way I was carrying something forward without knowing I was doing it." He paused. "That's not a satisfying answer." "It's the true one," Logan said. "True and satisfying don't overlap as much as people want them to," Marcus said. Logan thought about that for a few days after Marcus left. He thought about the community college student Melissa Tran, who'd withdrawn her complaint under pressure from Carver, and whose original report had still existed in the filing system and had still contributed to the pattern Ochoa needed. He thought about the prior incidents at Patty's that Hannah had described, the ones that hadn't been reported, the ones that had shaped her expectation that nothing would stick. He thought about all the people who had tried and whose failed attempts had, without anyone planning it, built the road that made the eventual outcome possible. He thought, there's no wasted courage, even the kind that doesn't appear to work in the moment. It goes somewhere. It accumulates somewhere. Someone finds it later and uses it. He wrote that down on the whiteboard above Maisie's crayon dogs in his handwriting, which was not good. He left it there. Douglas Ashford's deposition in the civil RICO complaint took place in July and produced over 3 days and 600 pages of transcript, a portrait of a man whose primary operating principle had been that consequences were for other people. Not malicious exactly, in the way that the word implied a certain amount of deliberate intent. More like a man who had spent decades in an environment where outcomes were negotiable and had gradually lost the ability to imagine that they weren't. Renner called Logan after the 3rd day. He knew, she said, not the full scope, but he knew Tyler had filmed people, and that some of those people had complained, and when the complaints came to him, and they came through Carver, through the bank relationships, through the council connections, he made them go away because that was what he did with problems. Did he think of them as people? Logan asked. The subjects. A pause. He called them situations, Renner said. 3 times in the transcript, when asked directly about the individuals involved, he used the word situations. His attorney objected twice, and Douglas Ashford used it a 3rd time without appearing to realize he'd done it. Logan was quiet. The civil complaint is going to settle, Renner said. His attorneys have been signaling it for 3 weeks. It won't be the full amount we're asking for, but it'll be substantial, and the settlement terms we're insisting on include a public acknowledgement, not in legal boilerplate, in plain English, with his name attached, of the harm caused to the named individuals. He'll fight that clause, Logan said. He already has. We haven't moved on it. Renner paused. I don't care about the number as much as I care about the sentence with his name on it. The number goes into accounts. The sentence is the thing that stays in the record. Logan understood. He'd been in enough situations to know that accountability had different currencies, and the ones that couldn't be negotiated down to a number were often the most valuable, precisely because they couldn't be. The settlement was reached in October, 14 months after a Tuesday afternoon in a diner off Route 9. The acknowledged amount was $1, $2 million, distributed across 22 named victims according to a formula Renner's team had developed with the advocacy organization in Richmond. Marcus Webb's share went immediately into a scholarship fund for students at the Norfolk High School where he taught. Melissa Tran's share covered the final 2 years of her nursing degree and the cost of relocating to a city where she didn't have to live with the proximity of what had happened to her. Hannah's share, she was named as a primary victim in the federal case, which made her part of the civil settlement, was $84,000. She called Logan the morning the wire transfer confirmed. I don't know how to feel about it, she said. You don't have to figure that out right now, he said. I know. A pause. I'm going to pay off Claire's medical debt. What's left after that, I'm going to put into the foundation. Hannah, don't say it's too much, she said. I've thought about it. But I was going to say it's your decision, he said. Oh, a beat. Okay. You could also just keep some of it, he said. She was quiet for a moment. I'll keep some, she said. Enough for a real emergency fund. And I might get a car that doesn't make a sound when I accelerate. That's reasonable, he said. It's making a new sound now, she said. A different one. I feel like I should address it before it becomes a whole thing. You should, he said. A short silence, comfortable the way their silences had become. Then, Logan. Yeah. Thank you for calling me that day, she said. After the diner, the second call. You didn't have to do that. I know. I don't say it enough. You don't have to say it, he said, but thank you for saying it. Another silence. Then Hannah said, quietly, I think I'd like to have dinner, not for a reason, not to talk about the foundation or the case or any of it, just dinner. Logan was standing in the farmhouse kitchen. October again, the full turn of the year completed. The field was going to its fall colors, the same frost gray he'd watched from this window for 12 months of the strangest year of his life. When? He said. Saturday, she said. If you can get someone to stay with Maisie. Dana owes me approximately 40 favors, he said. He heard Hannah breathe, a small sound, caught. Then, Saturday then. Saturday, he said. He told Maisie that evening, matter-of-factly, the way he told her most things, not building toward it, not framing it with excessive care that would signal something requiring preparation. He was helping her with homework at the kitchen table, and he said, between her spelling words, that he was having dinner with Hannah on Saturday, and Dana was going to come stay. Maisie spelled necessary correctly, looked up, and said, I like Hannah. I know, Logan said. She came to Claire's thing, Maisie said. A month prior, Logan had brought Maisie to a small gathering Hannah had organized for several of the foundation's outreach contacts, and Claire had been there. And Maisie had spent 40 minutes talking to Claire about the physics of wheelchair turning radius, which Claire had explained with complete seriousness and which Maisie had found genuinely fascinating. She did, Logan said. Maisie considered. Is it like a date? What do you know about dates? Logan asked. Dad, she said, with the particular patience of an 8-year-old explaining the obvious to someone who should know better. I'm 8, not 4. Fair, he said. Yeah, it's like a date. She processed this. Then, with the economy of someone who had said everything necessary, okay, and returned to her spelling words. Logan looked at the whiteboard. There's no wasted courage. His handwriting imperfect above the crayon dogs. He thought, I've been afraid of this too, actually. Not in the way of large fears, not in the way of things that wake you at 3 a.m. or cost you a year of your life to understand, but in the small, specific way of someone who had built something careful after losing something large, and who had learned that care was a discipline, and who understood that letting someone into the careful thing was its own kind of risk. He was still afraid of it. He was going to do it anyway. He figured that was probably how it was supposed to work. Oka. The dinner was unremarkable in all the best ways. A restaurant in Dunmore that was neither too formal nor too casual. The kind of place with wooden tables and a wine list that didn't require expertise, and a menu that had 4 things Logan recognized and 2 things he didn't, and he ordered one of the ones he didn't because Hannah mentioned offhandedly that the Bronzino was good, and she'd had it once when Renner had taken her there, and he'd filed that information without being obvious about it. They talked about things that weren't the case and weren't the foundation for approximately the first 20 minutes, which had its own slight awkwardness. The relearning of each other outside the context of the thing that had defined how they'd met. Hannah had opinions about a novel she'd been reading that were specific and interesting and not at all what he expected, because the book was a thriller, and her opinion was that the protagonist was making a fundamental error in emotional intelligence that the author seemed to think was a strength, and that this error was structurally doing damage to the second act. "You've thought about this a lot," Logan said. "I read it in 4 days," she said. "I had feelings. Tell me the feelings." She did. He listened. He pushed back twice, because she was making an argument that had a gap in it about character motivation, and she acknowledged the gap and reworked the argument, and he found that he was genuinely engaged in it, not performing interest, not managing a conversation, but actually invested in what she thought and why. He thought, this is the thing. Not the history, not the shared difficulty, not the mutual respect that had built through a year of a hard thing. This, the actual person on the other side of the table, who had read a thriller in 4 days and had complex feelings about the second act. He thought about what it costs people to let themselves be seen, really seen, not in the way of crisis, where you're seen because you have no choice, but in the way of choosing to be the full version, the one with the opinions about novels and the $40 a week calculations and the fights with her sister about coffee and the bathroom with the portable grab bar and the car that made the new sound. The version that wasn't assembled for consumption or sympathy or any particular effect. Just, this is who I am, and I'm showing you on purpose. Hannah had done that from the start, he realized. Even at the beginning, when she'd had every reason to present only the version of herself that was easiest to defend. She'd told him about the wheelchair fund, about the GoFundMe, about the prior workplace dispute, about the ways in which the full picture of her life could be used against her. She'd told him anyway, because she'd decided, some calculated, unsentimental part of her had decided, that if he was going to stand next to her, he was going to do it with correct information. He loved that about her. The word arrived quietly and without fanfare, the way true things sometimes did, and he let it sit without examining it too hard. After dinner, they walked for a while on the main street of Dunmore, which was not busy, November having done its work of clearing the sidewalks of everyone except the people who had a specific reason to be outside. The air was cold and clear, the particular winter clarity that made things slightly too sharp-edged, and their breath made small clouds, and they were walking close enough that their arms occasionally touched. "I want to ask you something," Hannah said. "Okay, and I want you to answer it honestly." "When have I not?" he said. She acknowledged this with a slight tilt of her head. "What happens in 5 years? With the foundation? With all of it?" She paused. "I'm asking because I need to know if you're building something or if you're filling the space where the contract used to be." He walked for a moment before answering. "Both, maybe," he said. "At the start. I don't think that's dishonest. I think the thing you use to get yourself moving isn't always the same thing as what keeps you moving once you're there. And what's keeping you moving now?" He thought about Marcus Webb and his scholarship fund, about Melissa Tran and the nursing degree, about the 47 names on the legal pad, which he'd transferred to a proper intake record now, but still thought of as lines on a handwritten page. "The work," he said. "The work is real, and it matters, and I'm good at some parts of it and bad at other parts of it, and I'm learning the parts I'm bad at." He paused. "That's usually how I know something is mine, when I still want to do it after the newness wears off." Hannah was quiet, walking beside him. "Has it worn off?" she asked. "Not even close," he said. She nodded. Something in her posture settled slightly. Not tension releasing, Because Hannah didn't carry tension in the visible way, but a small adjustment, like someone who has been holding a position for a while and has chosen, carefully, to rest. "Okay," she said. He stopped walking. She stopped a half step after him, turned to look at him. "I want to tell you something," he said. She looked at him. Her expression was open, which was not her default setting and which meant she was choosing it. "The dinner wasn't just dinner," he said. "I know," she said. I'm not in a hurry," he said. "I don't want to be in a hurry, but I wanted you to know that this is a direction I'm interested in, on purpose." The corner of her mouth moved. Not a full smile. Not yet, not in this conversation, but the precursor to one. "A direction you're interested in," she said. "It's how I talk," he said. "I know how you talk," she said. "I've been listening to you talk for a year." "Then you know I mean it," he said. She looked at him for a moment in the cold November air, the street quiet around them, and then she said, "I know you mean it." A pause. "I'm not in a hurry either." "Okay. But I'm also interested," she said. "In the direction." He felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't fully known was tight. "Okay," he said. They walked back to the restaurant lot where their cars were parked, and when they said goodnight, she touched his arm once, briefly, and got in the car that was making the new sound, and he stood there and watched until the taillights rounded the corner. He drove home through the dark Virginia roads with the heater on and the radio off, and he thought, this is what after looks like. Not the absence of difficulty, not the erasure of everything that cost something to survive, but the life that's still being built on the other side of it. 2 years later, the Real Foundation had offices in 3 states. It was not a success story in the clean, photogenic sense. It was messy and underfunded in its second year, and almost lost 2 key staff members to burnout, which Logan addressed by bringing in a director of operations who had actual nonprofit experience and who told him, on her first week, that he'd been running the organization on military logistics instincts, and about 60% of what he did was correct, and the other 40% was making the people who worked for him quietly miserable. He thanked her and implemented her recommendations, most of which he found uncomfortable, and all of which were right. Marcus Webb left the board after 18 months to run for his local school board, which he won. He called Logan from the campaign office on election night and said, "This is because of the last 2 years, understanding that institutions can be changed if you stay in them." Logan said, "I think you were always going to do this." Marcus said, "Maybe, but I might have needed the proof of concept first." Deputy Carver was formally dismissed from the Cedar Fork Sheriff's Department in the fall, following the internal affairs investigation. He did not face criminal charges, which Moll had told Logan she thought was probably the right outcome, given the specifics of what could be proven: facilitation and silence rather than active criminal conduct, and which she acknowledged was also imperfect and incomplete and the kind of thing that required acceptance rather than resolution. "I don't love it," she said. "I've made my peace with it." Caroline Ashford ran for her county council seat again 2 years later and lost by 11 points, which was not enormous but was enough. Douglas Ashford's name appeared in the settlement acknowledgement in plain English, as Renner had insisted, and the document was publicly filed and remained in the public record, which was what Renner had said mattered. His commercial real estate portfolio contracted significantly as several institutional relationships quietly ended. He did not go to prison. He lived in the same house with the gate and the circular driveway. He had, by all visible accounts, become smaller. Logan thought about that sometimes, not with satisfaction, because satisfaction felt like a full stop, and this was not a full stop, but with the particular recognition that consequences, when they finally arrived, rarely looked like what you'd imagined. They were quieter, more diffuse, more like a gradual loss of ambient power than a dramatic reckoning. It was less cinematic than people wanted and more real than most stories admitted. Tyler Ashford served 21 months of his 32-month sentence, released early for good behavior and completion of a mandatory rehabilitation program focused on empathy and harm recognition. Logan did not know what to think about that. He knew that rehabilitation was the right framework, that 21 months wouldn't undo what the 47 people had carried, that the gap between institutional justice and actual repair was not something a sentencing guideline could close. He also knew that Tyler Ashford was 21 years old and had grown up in a world specifically designed to prevent him from understanding the weight of other people, and that whether a person could learn that weight after the fact was a question he didn't feel equipped to answer. He left it open. Some things were better carried as questions. Maisie was 9, and then 10, and then 11, and the farmhouse became the kind of place that accumulated evidence of a life being lived in it. The crayon dogs still on the whiteboard because no one had erased them. Rex's water bowl moved to accommodate a strategic expansion of the living room rug, school projects on the refrigerator, a second bicycle in the barn when the old one got too small. Hannah was there often enough that Claire once called the farmhouse your other place when talking to her, and Hannah had corrected her out of reflex and then not finished the correction and let it stand. She and Logan had not rushed it. They had not made announcements or had formal conversations about what they were or where it was going. They had, in the way of two people who had both learned the hard way that rushing toward a version of something before the real thing was ready only produced a brittle replica of what you actually wanted. They had let it develop at its own pace, which was slow and deliberate and sometimes frustrating, and theirs in a way that neither of them would have traded for a faster version. Maisie, who missed very little, had at some point stopped registering Hannah's presence as a notable event and started registering her absence on certain days as a mild disappointment. This transition happened without comment from anyone and was probably the most accurate measure available of where things stood. Claire came to the farmhouse once a month for what had begun as a foundation board meeting and evolved into a dinner that lasted well past any agenda. She and Logan had developed the specific friendship of two people who had arrived at each other sideways, through someone else, and found that they had more in common than the connection that introduced them. A particular kind of directness, a preference for problems stated plainly over problems managed politely, and a shared ability to sit with the fact that some things didn't resolve cleanly without needing to pretend otherwise. On one of those evenings, after Maisie had gone to bed, and the board agenda had long since been abandoned, and Logan and Hannah were doing dishes in the kitchen while Claire sat at the table with the remains of the evening's coffee, Claire said, "Can I say something without it being a thing?" "No," Hannah said from the sink. "I'm going to say it anyway," Claire said. This is good. This is really good. And I know you both know that, and you don't need me to say it. But I'm saying it because I've been watching the two of you for 2 years. Do this careful dance where neither of you acknowledges how obvious it is, and I find that genuinely exhausting to observe. Hannah did not turn around from the sink. Logan dried a plate and put it in the cabinet. "I'm not asking you to do anything differently," Claire said. "I'm just registering it, for the record." "Registered," Logan said. "Thank you," Claire said. She picked up her coffee. Hannah turned from the sink and looked at Claire with an expression that had given up trying to be reproachful and was hovering somewhere between exasperation and something warmer. "Are you done?" "For now," Claire said. "Tut." There was an evening in the spring of the second year, a Thursday, nothing particular about it, when Logan came home late from a meeting in Richmond, and the farmhouse was quiet and Maisie was asleep, and Rex was at the foot of her door, and the kitchen light was on. Hannah was at the kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee that had clearly gone cold without her noticing, going through intake forms from the Foundation's new Maryland program. She looked up when he came in. "How was it?" she said. "Long," he said. He set his jacket over the chair and got a glass of water and came and sat across from her. She looked at him for a moment. "You're tired." "Yeah." "Did it go okay?" "Yeah," he said. "It went okay." She turned back to the intake forms, and he sat there across from her, and the kitchen was quiet, except for the sound of the old house settling, and somewhere outside an owl doing its business in the dark. And Logan sat in that ordinary quietness and thought, not for the first time, but in the way that a true thing deepens each time you reach it, that this was it. Not a step toward something, not a holding pattern or a recovery or a chapter before the next thing. This was the thing itself. The table with the woman working across from it. The dog at the child's door. The 47 names that had become 300 names across 3 states that were becoming something else, always becoming, never fully arrived. The field outside going to spring for the 3rd time since he'd pulled into this county on a rented truck with everything he owned and his dog in the back seat and no idea what he was building. He hadn't known. He still didn't know the full shape of it. He thought that might be the point, that the people worth building things with were the ones who were also building, who hadn't already decided what the end looked like and were working backward from a conclusion, but who were moving forward with their hands in the actual material of the thing, shaping as they went, making mistakes, correcting them, continuing. Hannah looked up again. She had the particular look she got when she caught him being quiet in a specific way. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Just nothing." She looked at him for another moment. Then, "Okay," she said, and went back to her work. He sat there a while longer in the kitchen light. This was the thing no one told you about courage. Not the kind in the stories, the decisive moment in the diner, the man who stands up when 40 people sit down. That kind was real. He knew it was real, but it was the beginning, not the whole. The whole was the 1,000 ordinary evenings after, the ones that didn't have an obvious moral and didn't produce a clear accounting of whether you'd done enough. The whole was the intake forms and the long meetings and the names on the legal pad and the car making the new sound and the careful dance that Claire found exhausting and the pasta with the green lid and the child who asked whether the people you were helping were going to be okay. The whole was choosing, in the absence of any particular pressure or drama, to stay in the work and in the life and in the room. Logan had spent a long time thinking that purpose arrived, that if you did enough of the right things, you'd reach a place where the uncertainty resolved and the shape of your life became clear. He understood now that it didn't work that way. Purpose wasn't a destination. It was a practice. It was the daily decision to keep looking when looking was uncomfortable, to keep standing when standing cost something, to keep building even when you couldn't see the full structure. He thought about the moment in the diner, the 3 seconds, the reading of the room, the 40 people who had decided it was someone else's problem. He didn't think of himself as different from those 40 people. That was important to him. He had his own 40 people moments, the times he'd looked away or moved past something because the cost of engaging was inconvenient. He knew his own capacity for that. What had happened in the diner wasn't a demonstration of who he fundamentally was. It was a choice he made on a specific afternoon, which had been followed by 1,000 other choices, each one as available to him as the first, and none of them guaranteed. That was the thing he thought mattered most in the end. Not that any particular person was built for courage, but that courage was available. That it didn't require special training or particular history or the right circumstances. It required only that you look honestly at what was happening and ask yourself, what does this moment need from me? And am I going to give it? The answer wasn't always yes. He knew that. The work of the foundation was full of people who hadn't answered yes the first time, or the second time, who had waited until the calculus shifted or the cost of silence became higher than the cost of speaking. That wasn't failure. That was being human and trying to survive in a world that made truth expensive. But the answer could be yes. That was the part that mattered. The answer could always be yes. Outside, the Virginia spring was doing its unhurried work, the field going green by increments, the frost retreating toward morning, the year turning over into whatever came next with the quiet indifference of time that has no investment in outcomes and simply continues. Hannah closed her laptop. "I'm tired," she said. "Yeah," Logan said. She stood up. She paused at the table, looked at him for a moment, and touched the side of his face once, briefly, with the back of her hand. Not a question, just a fact, stated in the language they'd been building together, imperfect and specific and theirs. Then she went down the hall toward the room that had become hers when she stayed, and Logan sat there a moment longer in the quiet kitchen. The outdoor light was on. Through the window, the field was dark and still. He thought, this is what you build when you decide not to look away. Not the clean version, not the version anyone writes down in the first sentence of a story. The real version, complicated and incomplete and still going, always still going, with more left to do than has been done, and more people to find and more names to add to the list. He turned off the kitchen light. He went to bed. Outside, the field held its dark and its quiet and its slow, insistent green. And the night passed the way nights do, without asking permission, without ceremony, carrying everything forward into whatever the morning was going to ask of the people inside the house. Whatever it was, they would meet it. They had learned, both of them, that that was enough.